Hello, my fellow Westorians. It's Monday. Welcome back to another spoiler-free review of House of the Dragon. This time, of course, it's episode 7. We're streaming less than 24 hours after the episode airs, and we have had no advance screeners or anything like that, so we're right there with y'all. Spoiler episodes, of course, take place on Saturdays at 3 o'clock Eastern. You can catch those live, or always catch the afterwards, the replay of the live stream, or catch it on podcast version on places like iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Music, and of course our home base Spotify. And the videos are always on YouTube. Make sure to check out our synopsis videos before each live stream. That's always importante. We wrap it all up, we tie it together, and try to succinctly let y'all know what we believe happened in the episode to the best of our ability. And here we are to discuss it in greater detail. Sean, what are you drinking today? Any special dragonish, storm brewing, blood and fire, Valyrian beverage, anything like that? What do you got? That's pink again. You got 2 weeks in a row of pink.
Yeah. A lot of times the different things I mix together come out pinkish and purplish. This is the strawberry bang with the blue voltage Mountain Dew and the naked berry protein drink.
Look at me. I got pink as well. I got a pink grapefruit sparkling ice.
Ugh, grapefruit.
Yeah. Shout out to Dragon Lord Eric the Evening Shade, Lord of the Groves, and Defender of Stygi, rider of Ixodes Scapularis, the Bloodthirsty, a dragon with purple scales and wings, red underside, black horns, and green eyes. Notably lacking in that large gathering of dragons is a purple dragon. So, maybe one day. Let's start off with our 3x3. Last week on Facebook, we did our usual poll. Emily Carey took it down. I'm sorry, not Emily Carey.
Impressive.
Olivia, it was Emma Darcy took it down. I didn't even have the right the actor there, so all wrong there. Yes, Emma Darcy took it down with their fantastic performance. Really excellent, starting off with the pregnancy scene and then carrying on throughout the whole episode. Also, notable mention goes to, you know what? I forgot to pull up the poll here. I'll have to pull up that later, but always check out our polls on Facebook and vote who you think the best performance was. This week, I will say Olivia Cooke. I was very impressed by her explosion of frustration after being pent up for so long, her ability to portray her contempt and stare daggers is somewhat unparalleled. It's funny that she needed to grab a dagger because she can shoot them out of her eyes. I mean, I don't think she needed. Maybe she just, the more daggers, the better. What about you, Sean? Who did you pick?
I pick Olivia Cooke as well. That moment, sometimes I don't know if we're being fair because she's got such a good moment to perform, right? Some of the actors don't get that. But hey, she got it and she nailed it. That was, in addition to the dagger staring, the lip trembling, the kind of the range of emotion she's going through too, because it's anger, but she's also maybe ashamed and disappointed in herself and shocked at what's happened. And it's just such a swirl of all sorts of emotions. It's hard to imagine what's going through her mind, although less hard when you see her acting. You can, stir over it quite a while after the fact. So.
Right on. Shay, what about you?
I think we're unanimous again this week.
Unanimous.
I'm not going to censor myself or hold myself back because you guys both said Olivia, but I'm saying Olivia too. She was particularly good. We've said Emma last week, so it just feels fair to say Olivia. But I also want to give a special shout out to all the kid actors who, that's a hard day's work, is all I'll say there. Especially them getting bloodied up and beaten and dealing with CGI dragons and having to pull it off. So a hearty shout out to all of those younger kids.
Yeah, it's a nice time to remind us that the kids had it real hard this episode. They had it hard last episode, but this one in particular, and it probably won't get much easier for them. There's a lot of pressure put on them, a lot of things they don't understand, a lot of ambitions that are above their heads, a lot of just people not treating them the way they would expect it to be. The kids are at home at Driftmark and they're still being treated like bastards. Not even there can they be treated right. So, but in real life, Shay, you were taking note of all their excellent behind the scenes footage where they're just dancing and playing. And it's a reminder that those kids, the fictional kids, are having a hard time, but the real kids, they're having a blast.
Yes, indeed. The kids are always dancing behind the scenes, a real dance of the dragons behind the scenes.
The kids are all right.
Yeah, I've been sharing some clips to a History of Westeros TikTok. If any of y'all are on TikTok, we're the History of Westeros, and we've had some pretty big hits the last couple weeks on there, so that's been cool.
Yeah, we're new on TikTok, but it's a fun place to share short videos just like these. This is a perfect place for that, so yeah, why not? I did look up our Facebook poll from last week while we were chatting. Second place, it was first place Emma Darcy with 41%, which is pretty high, one of the higher vote counts we've seen. Second place was Olivia Cook. Oh, I'm sorry, no, Nana Blondell was second place with 13%. That's Lena. Third place was Olivia Cook with 12%. And then honorable mention goes to both Matthew Needham and Ryan Core. That's Larys and Harwin. They did pretty well in the voting. All right, let's keep it rolling. Highlight plot scene. I'll say the aftermath in the hall. It's the same thing we're praising Olivia Cook for most of all, even though she had a lot of fine moments in the episode. That one in particular. It's the culmination of their relationship, all the anger they have towards each other, all the frustrations, all the built-up wrongs, perceived or otherwise, just coming together in this really impactful climactic moment that's been foreshadowed as well as shown on trailers. Like, this scene was shown to us in the trailers, one of the earliest scenes we saw. So we knew it was coming, and it did not disappoint. Shea, what about you? What do you have?
I really liked the kind of wake, the reception after the funeral, where everyone is kind of just making these glances at each other, and Rhaenyra is kind of circling the group, trying to listen in to some conversations between Viserys and Daemon, and she's very focused on Daemon in that scene. But you also get like these shots of like Alicent, mean mugging her, and I just a lot of really good facial reactions there. But the highlight of that little section to me was Jace confessing, like, I do know, and I think we should be in Harrenhal, and then him going to go comfort Baela and Rhaena. I really wanted to see more scenes with these young kids, so that was a huge highlight for me.
Yeah, Rhaenyra, she's almost like a ghost in that scene. Like, no one was looking at her. She was just kind of floating through the crowd, and it's really neat because of her status and everything, but like the lack of even, only a couple of people even looked at her. Sean, what about you?
Real quick, I want to say a couple things about that scene, because I also appreciated it and almost picked it as mine. But I felt like Rhaenyra was looking for allies in that crowd. She's trying to figure out and not finding them. She's trying to figure out who can I go talk to that won't turn me away or be ashamed or whatever. I also thought that when she sent Jace over to talk to the sisters, that what if Alicent had sent her sons over to talk to those sisters?
Ooh.
That
interesting.
It might have been the more tactful, appropriate bonding thing to happen, and she's not doing that. Although those boys might have screwed it up too. I don't know, but
the idea of peace from Alicent's side, I think, is long gone. And if Rhaenyra had any thoughts of peace, they're now gone too. I think maybe they faded a little bit after Alicent's, but not long after, if so at all.
I think you're right, but I think at that funeral there was like this hope. There's this chance someone might find some reconciliatory emotion or common ground. But Alicent did not try. And again, Aegon's just getting drunk anyway. So
that kid doesn't look great, does he?
And there was that moment what if
Aemond and is it Baela that didn't have her own dragon?
Rhaena doesn't have a dragon yet.
She's the one trying to hatch her egg last time,
If they could have bonded over that, maybe. And it would have stopped Aemon from trying to take Vhagar. Like, it's possible that those kids getting along better and the parents angling for that might have caused things to play out differently. Maybe it's inevitable what's going down here, but I can't help but think about it.
What were you going to say, Shay?
I was going to say there's this like subtle moment where after Rhaenys has kind of shut out Jace from comforting Baela and Rhaena, like she has Jace turn around, like she really rejects Jace right there, which we'll get into a little bit later. But after she does that and Jace turned around, Aemond comes sidling up and like makes eye contact with Jace, and then they stand across the brazier together and like look down, clearly thinking, in my opinion, about Harwin Strong, about how he lost his father to a fire. And I think Aemond is really close to saying something to him about it, but to say that would be to also insult him, to acknowledge his loss. And so they just have this this moment that sits between them that I thought was just really heavy and like such a what could have been type moment. Like that's the moment where like if Aemond had said the right thing right there, they could have bonded. But realistically, anything Aemond said, Jace would have bristled at, I think.
Yeah, especially because he's in a bristly mood. Everything was like even the Vaemon's speech was aimed at him. Even he was getting poked at in the eulogy. Even like what a thing for a child to have to endure, right?
Aemond might have been able to find the right thing, especially because now, like, not only are their parents at odds, but they're going to different places, and it's kind of sad. But anyway, my favorite moment is that for similar reasons to why you picked the wake of the funeral, Shay, to those glances, to all those people looking back and forth at each other. You got a very similar thing at the end, but the powder keg exploded in that time. We're like looking at the powder keg in the beginning, but the fuse hasn't gotten to its end yet, and it did at the end, and so it had a similar sort of tension and sort of this multi-interactive, all these different relationships being featured, but then you actually get the boom.
So highlight dragon bit. I was tempted to pick just the shot of all of them together because we've never seen so many dragons together, but I got to go with Vhagar blocking out the moon because that's also a moment in Fire and Blood. Visenya flies Vhagar past the moon, and for a long time we thought Vhagar might be red because we didn't know what color Vhagar was. For like 25 years almost, George kept it hidden before finally making her green, which kind of tells you where she ended up a little bit. Maybe you could consider her color to be foreshadowing. But in that moment, described in Fire and Blood, when Visenya flies Vhagar past the moon, it says the moon like was said to be as red as blood. So it was like, well, I guess Vhagar might be red, but nope, that's not the case. So either way, it was awesome. Shaya, what about you? Something Vhagar related?
Yeah, it would. it would definitely be the Vhagar claiming scene. Aziz was like, you can't just choose that because it's long and everyone will choose it. But I think I can choose that actually. And
I can't tell you what to do.
Me. But no, I think it was Aemond riding on Vhagar, but I guess if I had to pick a favorite moment from that sequence, it would be when Aemond lands back on Driftmark and he just crushes the landing where everyone was just doing that little wake ceremony. I don't know if you guys caught that, but when he lands, he just
the little tent,
the little pavilion, they just crush it underneath him, which just shows to me that like he doesn't have full control over this dragon. This is new to him. It was on purpose that they made that decision. So I guess I'll shout out that.
Right on.
It does also show how big and powerful the dragon is. Like without noticing, it can just kill 10 people. Like if people had been there, they might have just been crushed. And it harkens back to when Daemon did that with Syraxes, when he was like
crushed that
going
one guy.
in to rescue his people and kills one of his own people. That it's just collateral damage when a dragon comes into play.
Did you call Syraxes there?
I might have.
Cyrax. That's their ship name for the two dragons, Syrax and Caraxes. Syraxes.
I do pick the moment though when all the dragons were together.
Oh,
I thought, wow, that's just impressive to think about. Just
foreshadowing the wake where there's all this like anger and built up like foreshadowing of war. It's like, well, this is what's gonna. These are the weapons of war just sitting there.
Yeah, and that's not even all of them, right? No. There's at least a couple others, and I also, like, a little piece of me is thinking logistically about how much dragon poop is there, eating all those dragons. How much is this costing the Valyrians?
He wasn't thinking about any of those other things, just the dragon poop.
I'm sure.
There was dragon poop in this part of Fire and Blood. There was Joffrey in the book. It's Joffrey instead of Baela and Rhaena in this scene where they fight over Vhagar after Vhagar is claimed. And Aemond pushes little Joffrey into a pile of dragon droppings as part of their like scruff there. Yeah. I would say this episode may have had the best dialogue of all the ones so far, which is really saying something. Saying something. It's a debatable, of course. Your mileage may vary, but it was definitely the most quotable in terms of what they used to quote, in terms of what was used in trailers and teasers. There's a number of things we've been hearing all season long that finally happened in this episode, and we'll point those out as we go through. I made a point of doing that in our synopsis episode as well, but there's probably a couple more in this one. Let's talk real quick about some themes, some things we noticed that are patterns, themes, things recurring throughout the episode. Taunts and responses, that's one you noticed, Sean. That's a good one. Blood, in terms of multiple meanings of blood. Literal blood. Blood is in terms of family. Legacy and how that ties into blood and how it stands alone. Inspiring fear, especially to prevent your enemies from striking at you, like as a way to stop them from ever wanting to come after you in the first place. This was one of the first scenes they shot throughout the entire run of the show, which maybe is why some of the quotes were used, or maybe they were just really fired up. You know, they were like, all right, we're finally writing this, and it was some of their best work right away when they had it all built up. I don't know.
But that was an interesting thing that this was like the first thing that they really filmed, which helps show the estrangement between everyone, because they hadn't, all the actors hadn't gotten comfortable with each other yet. So like, I think it really worked in their favor.
It's kind of clever to film this scene early because they used that. Like they don't know each other. It's hard to like fake that. I mean, they are professional actors, so they're good at that. But still, they didn't have to fake it as much here, which makes it even more natural. We could also say there's a lot of rejecting diplomacy, overtures for peace that just don't really work or are only temporary at most, like Viserys yelling at people. It doesn't really, we don't really think that's going to last. It's just more of a temporary measure when he's like, all right, stop fighting. He's like, okay, well, as long as you're around, okay. But once you're gone to not yell at us, what's going to happen? And along those lines, people taking sides in advance of all that, like preparing to see when the fighting begins. Well, we already have a great idea, at least in a lot of cases, of what side they'll take. And some particular lines in the sand are drawn in this one, almost literally in the sand, given all the beach that we see. And maybe we could say the old cliche, being what you were meant to be. A lot of people have momentous things that happen in this episode that really define them, or maybe define what they've always wanted to be. Aemon getting Vhagar, Daemon and Rhaenyra getting married. That's kind of been foreshadowed, and it's something they've always kind of both wanted. Alicent having her outburst, like Otto for one, was kind of happy about it, despite him wishing she did it a little differently. He still was happy to see that side of her. And there's other examples, maybe. And Laenor, of course, riding off into the moonrise, sailing off into the moonrise. Yeah. Being what he was meant to be, right? He doesn't want to be a royal. He doesn't want to live this life. He wanted to be something else. So yeah, probably other examples of that. Comment with your patterns, themes that you noticed, as well as your favorite moments in this episode, as Sean, Ashea, and I discuss. Driftmark. Almost the entire episode's on Driftmark, minus the scene on the ship, which is just sailing away from Driftmark, and the marriage, which was presumably at Dragonstone. Like that seemed like a footnote happening at Dragonstone. It was very cloudy and hazy the way Dragonstone usually is, and I'm pretty sure that was the Dragonstone Maester there. Also, it'd be kind of a weird thing to do at Driftmark. Like, oh, we're going to go ahead and get married here at your castle instead of going home, which is the next door island, you know? Especially because it's not going to look good. People are going to be upset that they got married so quickly. So it's a little bit scandalous. Not like a huge deal, but definitely a deal. But we'll talk about that when it happens. When the reaction comes, I mean. So we have a wedding, or had a wedding. We had a hunt. We had a tournament. Why not a funeral? Another reason to gather, and nothing ever goes wrong when they get the whole family together, right? Especially because the family keeps getting larger, right? The bigger the family gets, the more peaceful it gets, right? Wrong. Vaemon's speech. Let's go back to that. It was really good, though, wasn't it? Despite being rude, it was really good. Like, his crappy to Luke and Jace, talks about the thickening and thinning of blood and mentions Laena's true-born daughters. But it was beautiful. It was very poetic. He mentions the Merlin King, which was pretty cool. We'll have to talk about the Merlin King separately sometime.
Yeah, that is canon, that the Velaryons are known, and I think it's mentioned in Fire and Blood or World of Ice and Fire or something like that they worship or pay homage to the Merlin King. Maybe worship is an extreme term for it.
Yeah, probably not worship. But yeah, I think, certainly pay homage to, or,
They
hold
respect, have a healthy respect for the
go.
Merlin King, enough to mention him.
It seems like Vaemon's attitude is, given his speech, like Rhaenys's. He's more about the actual bloodline than what the histories will write down, which comes to be a very interesting conversation between Corlys and Rhaenys later, which we'll get to in a minute. So we'll come back to that. So many sarcophagi down there, right? There's a lot of those over the years. It's like a reef building up of dead Velaryons.
Yeah, that is what they said in the House the Dragons Built featurette, that they've been dumping these sarcophagi right off the coast of Driftmark for so long that it's built up like kind of a base at the island, like I was calling it like a coffin reef.
Yeah, coffin reef. That's a good name for it.
Which
Coffin
is
reef.
interesting.
Or sarcophagus reef. Yeah. So that's cool. Good world building there. Daemon flat out laughs. I think we're not supposed to be entirely sure if Luke and Jace get it, but I'm pretty sure they do, especially Jace. I think they get it. I think they get that they're being made fun of, which is, again, I'll point out, this is at the place that's supposed to be their ancestral home, which isn't, because they, in a way, don't have the Velaryon blood, but officially they do. So it's kind of awkward, right? It's very confusing for kids their age.
Although Luke is not Luke isn't really keyed into this yet, is what they confirm for us after he's like, my father's alive.
Yeah, my father's alive. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's true. My father's
We had been
alive,
wondering that last week, whether, how keyed in Luke was, because obviously Jace knows, but does Luke? And it seems, even if Luke has any inkling, he doesn't really know.
Yeah, I think that even if he knew, I still don't know if he could read through the lines of that speech.
Yeah.
I at that age, I would have just been zoning out. Some meandering speech someone's making.
You might have been like Aegon. Aegon looked so bored. He was like, oh.
Yeah, Aegon was kind of bored. I wanted to say, by the way, that I am actually two things. I didn't even consider whether or not Aegon was reading between the lines. He might be too dismissive and also just not really paying attention.
And he already knows anyway. They already it might be relevant for him to know that even the people in his own house or in their own house are saying this about them. But I think I'm with you. I think he just wasn't paying attention. Look at this guy. He's like so checked out. Yeah.
He
was ready to get to the drinking.
I didn't want to be too contrary. I hadn't thought about it too much either, but I didn't really think the speech was, or I should say, if the speech was beautiful, I was too distracted from its beauty by his
rudeness.
I want to say inappropriateness. Yeah. It sounded to me like a politician taking advantage of a tragedy to push their agenda.
Sure.
And to the point that you get someone to laugh, like you got, like, I don't know.
But the question we get here, Lady Starfall, why do we think Daemon laughed during the eulogy? What was so funny about what Laena's uncle was saying? It's because he was emphasizing Daemon's true-born daughters with Laena. He's very clearly making a political statement, and Daemon thinks that that's funny.
I think Vaemon wants to test Daemon as well. He's trying to sound this out. He's like, well, I think those two should inherit Driftmark over the Strong boys. Well, he wants to see how Daemon's father is going to react to that. He's like, well, maybe he agrees. Maybe he wants to help seize, on their behalf, seize Driftmark for themselves or something like that. So he might be testing Daemon a little, and Daemon just laughs.
I thought he was laughing at the idea that he would push it that far. He's like, really? You're going there? Okay.
Like Jace, they made a point to show Jace noticing the laugh, I think, and you're right. They didn't really show much of Luke in that moment. It was really about Jace and Daemon and.
Yeah, they literally cut close into Jace's face throughout all of that. I was really quite happy with how much they focused on Jace's reaction to this scene.
The children were not left out by any means. They were very prominent all throughout this episode, not just in the moments when they were fighting with each other and other stuff. Otto is hand again. They made sure to make that he did the old grabs his, the hem. very, very, very appropriate. Yes, I'm back in the saddle again. I really didn't think that would happen. I knew he would become hand again. I really didn't think we'd go straight to him, like no preamble. I thought there'd be Dragonstone or King's Landing before the funeral. I didn't know we'd go straight into it. But so that prediction of mine was off. But whatever. Pretty important. So moving on, Helena's dream. This is something we'll have to think about more. We haven't had a lot of time to really think it through, but the line she's saying is hand turns loom, spool of green, spool of black, dragons of flesh, weaving dragons of thread. And then she says it again. And then again.
So I have a few thoughts on Helena and her comments about that. One was obviously it makes you think of the iconic green and black dresses. Yeah. The fact that fabric colors are a huge part of this story.
How they portray their own loyalty and what side they're on, yeah.
But also I had the idea that we do see very clear different examples of thread in this episode, which is them sewing them back up. Aemond gets sewed back up and Rhaenyra gets sewed back up. So they each drag. That's my call on it, is that she's referring to the fact that they're both, each side is being scarred by this altercation.
Dragons of thread. That's a great call, because their flesh was rendered. And it also relates to her already dreaming about Aemond having to close an eye to take a dragon, and that's literally what gets stitched as well.
Yeah, so we see Rhaenyra's arm being stitched right here, as you can see, and then you see Aemon's eye, of course, being stitched.
That's funny, because at the moment of that one, I was like, okay, I get the eye one, that's a big one, but we don't have to see this stitching. It's just an arm wound, you know?
But I think that's why.
But now Ashea has given a very good reason why they wanted to emphasize that. So yeah, they did have a good reason.
Yeah, each side has been damaged by the altercation already.
Yeah.
Really.
However good the reason, I was still like, to my hands.
Yeah, you don't like needles.
Is this over yet?
So that's interesting. Yeah, we'll definitely have to think more about Helena's dream there. She's catching a spider in that moment in a shell. I don't know if that's... I mean, she likes catching bugs. She's a bug girl, so makes sense. Don't really know what... I guess she's adding it to her collection or just playing with bugs, or I don't know. Like I said, requires more thought. Let us know what you think of Helena, her dream, and the fact that she's now the rider of Dreamfire. We weren't sure if she had claimed her yet. We're pretty sure she hadn't, since Aemon was going for her. Now we know for sure she's the rider of Dreamfire, because Dreamfire is out there flying. Aegon calls her weird, doesn't want to marry her. Apparently they are not married yet, just betrothed. Makes sense. They're still a bit young to be fully married. I thought maybe there'd be more big deal made out of this, that this something that she would have to convince her husband of, but nope. Just they did it.
Of note that Aemond calls Helena your future queen.
Queen, yes, future queen,
yeah. Which
which goes to show how, despite everything Viserys says and demands, no one's really listening. People are going to do what they do. He's not facilitating his dictates, just demanding them. And this is evidence that they're not listening to him. They're like, yeah, she's your future queen. He doesn't, like, he's what, 10 or 11 here, 12 maybe? Yeah, that's a big deal.
Real quick, I wanted to say, I wonder if Helena catching that bug, and she's caught several other bugs already. Mm-hmm. She's studying them too. Larys is associated with a bug now.
Yeah.
Is she going to catch him? Is she going to figure out what he's doing? Is she going to study him? Is she going to see him in a vision? Or
Larys.
Yeah, Larys is associated with the Firefly emblem, as we talked about last week. That was confirmed off screen that is what that weird little bug on his cane is, for anyone curious. A firefly.
Yeah, well, we have very good reason to think about what she might dream about later, but a lot of that's spoilery, of course, so we shan't talk about that now.
But tune in on Saturdays for a spoilery prophecy discussion about Helena.
Yeah, by then we'll have more to say for sure, as well as the things that we can't say now. So yeah, Aegon, moving on to him, drinking, looking at serving girls, talking about how he likes long legs.
He's just like me, for real.
Doesn't seem like king material. Yeah, like...
I love him.
He's just draining.
Doesn't want to marry his sister, who's a weirdo. Like, I feel it.
You think he's trying to escape a little bit here, like the pressure and what his mother's demanding of him? You think some of that's like for trying to be, sympathetic?
I mean, listen, if I was at this funeral, I would be trying to escape too. So I'm really not. I'm not joking when I say Aegon is very relatable at this point in the story. I expect him to regress and be even worse and more degenerate going forward as he grows up and he has the opportunity to take advantage of his position, but he's young right now, so really he's just acting out.
Yeah, I don't suppose Otto will kick him when he's down when he's a full-grown adult. That's not...
I try to be fair, right? I try to hold everyone to the same standards. If I'm going to judge one person for doing X, then I'll judge another for doing X, and he's not that different than Rhaenyra at this age, right?
Yeah, that's true.
She didn't really care about this expectation on her, right? Yeah. She just, I'm a court, I got my dragon, I'm just here, I just want to have fun. And he's kind of the same thing. Like, maybe because he's a guy, he has a little more privilege or can be more dangerous or whatever. But fundamentally, he's kind of blowing off his responsibilities. He doesn't like all this court politicking. He just wants to have fun.
Yeah.
And that's about what Rhaenyra was like. So
yeah. Yeah, and we haven't seen other things he's done off screen. Like maybe he gives, I think, off more red flags than she did at her age. But yeah, I think you're right. Like ultimately, like judging them as just teenagers, not that different. There are substantial differences, but not like major bottom line differences. I would guess. But later, of course, that's likely to change.
Yeah,
but
I don't know where things are going.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I'm unsullied to clarify for viewers out there.
And I think
but-
his mom puts a lot more pressure on him than anyone ever put pressure on Rhaenyra. Like Viserys was kind of an absentee dad for a lot of times. I guess Emma did, but we didn't see it as much.
I would say more pressure. She puts more pressure on Aegon
Like
that we've
unfair
seen there,
pressure.
unfair pressure. But Viserys telling Rhaenyra about Aegon's dream, Aegon's prophecy, is a lot of pressure to put on
That's a good point.
anyone,
That's a fair
let
point.
alone a teenager, to know about like the end of the world. Like that's gotta really weigh on someone. So.
Sure, that's a good point. I guess it's a very different style pressure, one that's more demanding. Like she's literally in his face, grabbing him, and like you're stupid. You know,
Alicent
and
is
he'll
being
know
abusive
that to
with
Rhaenyra.
Aegon. In my I don't think it's I don't think it's a hot topic for me to say that a hot take to be like Alicent is abusing Aegon, but she's coming around and slapping him and grabbing him.
Like she was very unfair to him, and like, why didn't you defend your brother when he was being attacked by all these other kids? Like, I was in bed. Like everyone, like, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
Like, that's not
me?
my fault. Yeah, that one I sympathize with him there. Like, yeah, he was just in bed where he was supposed to be. They're the ones who snuck out of bed. How is he supposed to know? Like, he's not a dreamer.
I mean,
like his sister.
he was wasted, drunk, passed out earlier that
That's
night.
true. He wouldn't have gotten up anyway.
But you know.
He was wasted. Yeah, they could have tried to wake him up. He's like, I don't care. Bigger.
It might be better that he was in bed. He might have cut one of those other kids' eyes out.
We've seen him
like,
with a temper.
He had been there.
Yeah.
Like maybe him being there would have kept it from getting as physical.
Maybe.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe he's big enough and dominant enough that the others don't even try that. But who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that means, Luke actually is killed because or Jace is, because that's where it was going. If Aemon hadn't lost an eye with that rock, Aemon was about to kill one of those kids.
He might have killed
potentially.
him,
Do you think he was? Yeah.
I
don't think he was really going to smash a head in with the rock. I don't think he was going to.
I think he might have been. I think he was.
Been.
I think he really felt like he was defending his life, and he wasn't wrong. He was defending his life there because the knife was involved in the mix. Like,
I suppose I also would not have expected Luke to slice an eye out either. So, once they're going and weapons come out, someone might even accidentally or in the heat of it do it. Yeah.
And it's Rhaena that starts the whole thing off. Like, Aemon doesn't actually instigate the physicality of it all. Like, he instigated it in that he went and took the dragon and was rude
insults,
to them.
which in this society is generally acceptable reason to start fight.
But still, Rhaena just launches herself at him, and then he defends himself. But then he's pretty physical with the girls and all that, which we'll get more into that.
Yeah, let's come back to that. We didn't want to talk about this just yet. Let's come back to that. Baela, Rhaena.
I do have things to say.
Yeah, of course. Baela, Rhaena, and Jace talk about that at the wake. Rhaenyra sends him over to comfort them. At first, he complains that they should be a Strong funeral. It's like,
I love his line.
Kind of a fair point.
He says, "I have an equal claim to sympathy."
Yeah, again, the dialogue's so good.
Yeah, he's like that's a really good line.
So they end up holding hands, though, which is nice. That's a very nice moment there. Kind of a mirroring a bit to the Aemond Jace moment where they're not speaking, but there could have been a shared positive moment. Corlys and Luke have a conversation. Luke has his Jon Snow moment, doesn't he?
Yeah,
I don't want it.
I don't want it. That is an exact quote from Jon Snow. It's a dark-haired Targaryen thing. Oh, you wouldn't understand.
Dark-haired half Targaryen who's actually a bastard, who might
not
be
really
a bastard in Jon's case, but who knows? Yeah, you can see the similarities there for sure. But you gotta appreciate Luke's response. It's like, I don't want it. It's not because I don't want the title. It's like he's like, for me to have that, it would mean you and my dad would have to be dead. Like, I'm not really excited to think about that right now. Granddad. That's what he's saying. Is like, and Corlys is kind of speechless, like, it's kind of a good point, actually.
You'd see Corlys gave Luke a little, like, seahorse toy, too.
Yeah, shout out to, where is it? Eagle9128 on Twitter saying it kind of looks Etruscan, which I kind of agree with. Like Etruscan art, that's an Italian civilization near Rome. And but we know Aegon would want that toy because it has long legs. So that was a really short but meaningful scene. Moving on, let's talk about the discussion between Corlys and Rhaenys. We'll come back to Daemon and Rhaenyra. That's all going to be packed into one section, as well as Viserys and Daemon. Corlys and Rhaenys' disagreement on ambition and legacy. This has been kind of an ongoing debate between them, like something that's they talk about off and on throughout the season, and clearly have talked about before the season, throughout their lives. He has the famous line that we've heard many times in trailers and such, what is this brief mortal life if not the pursuit of legacy? She kind of throws it back in his face like, we don't all have the same idea about legacy, right? It's not, we don't all, legacy is not to you, isn't legacy to everybody else. It's a little bit like Harwin talking to his dad saying, you have your honor, I have mine.
Yeah, and I would really like to know, I would have loved for Corlys to ask Rhaenys when Rhaenys says, "Oh, well, legacy isn't everything to everyone." Is basically what is it to you? What is important to you, Rhaenys? Is it? Would she have said family? Would she have said love? Like what would her answer have been? I don't feel like I actually know.
Yeah. She hints at it being more like blood and family, like actual family in her mind. What she defines as actual family, meaning, people who are actually descend from you or whatever. But
going into this whole show, again, I'm pretty unsullied. I don't know these characters or all the events that go down, and I for some reason have in my mind that Corlys is going to be a heroic protagonist character. But in the trailers they had him saying that line, and I was immediately turned off and like, I don't like that mentality. I like that someone who thinks that the only point of life is the pursuit of legacy, not happiness or friendship or the safety of the people for whom you're responsible of when you're in his position. Like, there's a lot of other things in life beyond your legacy. And if that's really driving him, it made me worry that he might be a warmonger, or he might not take good care of his kids, or all these other things, which are playing out to be the case.
She flat out accuses him of that. She's like, you're the one, you tied our children into this danger. Yeah.
And kind of calls him out too for using her as a scapegoat. Like you want this, you're using, I'm over it. I'm not worried about being queen anymore.
And she's told him that before. She's told him that before.
Yeah. And so the fact that she still has to tell him again means that he still is pushing this agenda or not being fair to her or whatever it is. I feel like he's flawed in multiple
ways.
I
side with him on saying, no, you should just let Luke inherit Driftmark. We shouldn't cast this shadow and throw this thing at you. How do you feel about that?
I was a little perplexed because it seemed like she was challenging him. She's like, look, legacy is not the most important thing. But also, I want my kid to get this island. Like, well, hold on. I thought you just said legacy wasn't the most important thing. I was a little perplexed by how I was maybe disappointed because I thought she was going a different way. I thought she was saying, look, stay out of war, stay out of politics. Let's focus on, and instead she's saying, let's stir up the politics. Well, I mean, let's make it worse.
Which is where I think she's saying
he was mad about that.
Legacy is an important, blood connections matter, and I want my blood connection to be set up for the future, for the next generation, which you could call that a different form of legacy if you want, but maybe it's just a different flavor of it. But it does seem like a difference to me, the idea of her being like, I want these girls who I have a connection with because I look at them as my granddaughters to have a home and feel safe and whole, and maybe that's her thought there, and to be set up in life, whereas she doesn't think of her grandsons as her grandsons. Like, she just doesn't think of them that way, and you get that very clearly when she, like I said, when she goes to talk to Baela and Rhaena, and she just is very cold with Jace to the point that Jace feels like he has to turn around to give them privacy when that should be his grandma. That's supposed to be his grandma. Like, that's how cold Rhaenys is with him, which is not a laudable thing, and it very much gave me shades of like Catelyn Stark rejecting Jon Snow.
Again, Jon Snow
he
vibes.
Felt. Yeah. It's like a lot of Jon Snow vibes.
Time, but still.
I similarly expected Rhaenys to be a little bit more protagonistic, heroic of a character, and
there's
she's
no good
trying
guys.
To marry her 12-year-old daughter off to a 40-year-old man. She's like, you're not treating her grandchildren well. Like, I'm disappointed with her too. Let me ask something. It seemed to me in that moment, whether this was her intention or how well she had thought it out, if what she wants to do is, I don't know, disregard the legitimacy of Rhaenyra's kids so that her kids can get Driftmark, that's aligning her with Alicent, right?
Not overall, but in that one thing. I don't think she wants to override. I think Corlys was informing
I don't
her
think
that
she's trying to align with Alicent, but she may end up doing it if she pushed that. It seemed like Corlys shut it down anyway.
I think it's notable that I'll put a shot here of during the dagger fight, Vaemond is kind of over by Alicent's side, and so I think it does show that the succession dilemma, the succession conflict here on Driftmark does serve Alicent's interests.
It mirrors the succession crisis over the Iron Throne. It's one of the big mirroring elements of this episode. Is the same issues at Driftmark. This is like the appetizer for the bigger succession struggle, and as well, the children just constantly they're victims here, right? There's all these political decisions that they had nothing to do with, no choices made by them. They're just concessions of morality and ethics that lead to worse outcomes for them. Rhaenyra's choice to live her life her way is part of this. So is just the standard politics of Westeros. So is the violence of Alicent. So is the choice of Viserys to marry Alicent in the first place, so is Otto pushing her towards that. So is Can
I just say how funny it is to me, like that the wedding scene at the end with Daemon and Rhaenyra, because like the kids have just gone through like this very traumatic thing.
Oh yeah.
And then they see this weird bloody marriage ceremony like on this misty cliffside while they're each of their parents just like make out open mouthed with each other.
After slicing their lips open, they're like, what the hell is
bloody
this?
Mouth.
Like it's just
hey kid, let's go to the horror movie. Wedding.
Yeah. One has just lost their their mother and their father. The others one's lost mother and uncle. The other's lost father and father and father and like, aunt.
Just a weird moment for these kids, and I would like to get both sides of these kids' perspectives on the Daemon Rhaenyra marriage.
Yeah.
I would really like to see what they think of their new step-parent.
Yep. Yeah, I would like to see that too, and I hope we get that, although we're going to have a time jump, so we'll see that as them being much older.
Yeah.
So, we'll see.
I wanted to point out also, Aziz, that it's a little extra ironic, frustrating, tragic, or whatever, that these parents using their kids as pawns were themselves used as pawns by their parents, and they didn't learn the lesson. They're still doing it.
Yeah. So one other thing about Rhaenys, just to emphasize maybe why she cares more about strict actual bloodlines rather than what's written and what the histories will remember, like Corlys does, is she's Targaryen. They've always emphasized like how important the real bloodline is because of it ties to their dragon riding. Of course, these non-grandchildren of hers are already dragon riders, so that but still, she doesn't necessarily have to make that connection in her mind. That's just why to her it might matter more to her because she comes from a background where that's emphasized.
I mean, and you put yourself in Rhaenys' shoes. You look at these two little girls that just look just like their mother, your daughter who just died, and then you look at these these boys who look nothing like your son and
or their
mother, and are a reminder of this marriage that you weren't really super pro in the first place. Yeah. It's not surprising to me that she's so cold, but it is disappointing nonetheless. I would like Rhaenys to rise above it all and see that these little boys, like she knows that Jace just lost Harwin, like she knows that, and she still doesn't care.
Doesn't have that sympathy.
She doesn't have it.
We can assume her opinion on a lot of things is going to change because after she says this, now she thinks Laenor is dead unless they're going to tell her, which is possible. We'll come back to that later. And Vhagar has been claimed by Aemon. So like a whole lot has already changed since she uttered that line. So we can maybe already guess she's changed her mind or at least feels differently about it given several important things happened after she said that. Daemon and Rhaenyra getting married.
I hope she's like, Jace and Luke defended you, Baela and Rhaena.
Yeah, you know what? That could help. Yeah, you're right. They stood up and, Anyway, so let's talk about Vhagar getting claimed. Yeah, Aemond, not the best kid, but that was brave as hell, right? Like, it was really cool. Like, in that moment, it was awesome. I mean, look at this shot. That is awesome. Just the fire getting ready. He knows the fire's about to come, but he stands there and gives those commands, says what he's been taught, the High Valyrian words. He says Sovace, which means fly. He says Lakiri, which means calm. And, of course...
Aziz knows that all from doing the Dracarys AR app. Yeah. He's been practicing his dragon taming.
I remember the phrase Valar Dohaeris he says Doheras, which is serve.
Hyrus.
Doheras, serve. Obey. I think it might mean obey, like heal. It's kind of like
Same realm.
Yeah, it's kind of like telling a dog to take notice. The standard command to an animal. Yeah. So that was really cool. It was super fun, right? Like taking it as by itself, just as a slice of TV, super awesome. Just the dragging in the water, the wings in the water, the moon. It had all a range of excitement and emotions. It was fear, it was danger, it was silliness. When he's just like, whoa, it was like a cartoon there for a second, whoa, excited, the full range. I was not disappointed. We, as book readers, we knew this was going to be a big deal. It's why they didn't show Laena taming Vhagar, so they could save it all for this. Like, presumably that's a big part of why they didn't do that. And they didn't show a lot of Vhagar before at all, just to kind of save it for this. Also because it's really damn expensive to make scenes like this. Is probably part of why they put it at night. It maybe saved them a few dollars.
A few dollars, yeah, I would say.
$1 million.
Yeah, a few million.
But Aemon, just you think about his personality. This is like, however old, I don't remember exactly how old he is here, but he's kind of raised with a chip on his shoulder, right? We've already seen how he's been mocked by all these other kids, although not by Baela and Rhaena. He didn't know them. But he's the second son on the wrong side of a succession situation. So he doesn't have a dragon. He's kind of low on the totem pole. A lot in common with Daemon. Far down in the line of succession, a second son, kind of a little bit violent, a little aggressive, a little bit mocked. I don't know if Daemon was mocked when he was young, but still.
He feels like he has a lot to prove and not a lot to lose.
Yeah. Oh, good point. Yeah. Well said, Sean. Yeah.
You might call him, and Otto did, a rogue prince.
A rogue prince, just like Daemon. Yeah. Daemon himself, a rogue prince. So we're seeing more and more similarities between the two burgeoning. Obviously, Aemon's a lot younger than Daemon, but even their names, like just take the D, put it in front. It's the same name, so they're kind of mirrors of each other in a lot of ways, and that's just coming more and more into play. And now they're on opposite sides more definitively. He might have a little anger over this too. That was his former wife's dragon that he took the same day of her funeral. I mean, yeah, you could say the dragons are kind of up for grabs, but that's still kind of a shady thing to do. The day of the funeral.
Daemon slept with another woman the day of the funeral, so.
Well, I would say two wrongs don't make a right, but good point. I mean, but you're totally right. I wouldn't say Daemon's a good guy. He's a great character, but not a good man.
Also, Daemon is a grown man, and Rhaenyra is a grown woman.
Yeah.
They have more awareness and experience, so of the impact of their actions. This is a little kid who's getting bullied for not having a dragon. Hey, I'm going to get this dragon. Like, it might not have been like the most appropriate thing, but you don't expect 10-year-old kids to do the most appropriate thing, right?
Especially 10-year-old kids raised in these circumstances.
I think it is reasonable to expect 30-year-old royalty to do the right thing. They are supposed to,
and they never do.
They're not right. And so if they do, if their parents aren't, why in the world do you expect this kid to? Yeah, you really can't. You're totally. He definitely wasn't doing it to be mean to anyone, right? Yeah. He if it had crossed his mind, he might have thought like, maybe it's supposed to be her dragon, but I don't care. I'm doing it anyway. Yeah. And that's totally reasonable for a 10-year-old, maybe even a 30-year-old, right? Like even Otto was like, hey, I'd give up my eye for a dragon too, never mind, like upset some little girl's feelings. Get your dragon, dude. I'm not saying he necessarily did the right thing, but I don't think he was an evil, cruel person.
I agree. It was rude. It was inappropriate. Yeah. I mean, of course, the fighting afterwards is a lot worse, but we're not talking about that yet. To be clear.
Yeah.
And it's also a good example of like. It's like his personality flips, like a switch flips in his head. Now he goes from the one picked on to I've got the biggest dragon in the world. The old saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely, writ on a child. Like he just went like a child shouldn't have this level of power, and he's immediately flexing it, grabbing rocks, throwing insults, and they're fighting him too. I'm not saying it's all his fault. Although I think if I had to take a side, I would pick the little kid's side.
The little kid, I'm like, they're all little kids.
The littler children's side.
Are we to this point now? Or are we talking about
We are to this point, yeah. Rhaena, starts off with Rhaena being upset, confronting him, saying that's, I was going to claim that track. He's like, well, you should have. At that point, it's very standard kids yelling at each other. Like they're fighting over a toy. But we've seen what happens with kids fight over toys in this world. Sandor and Gregor, for example. This is very similar to that. The end result was someone's face getting maimed.
I tell you, when I was a little kid, I got in a big fight with my cousin who was a year older than me. I had a plastic pig. Like I have this plastic pig now.
Pink dread?
A pink dread. I had the pink dread, this like toy pig, and we were fighting over the computer access. I was supposed to have PC, like we had a computer room, you know, like as you do when you're at that age, you have a computer room. And so it was my turn. And my cousin wouldn't give it up. And I really felt that it was my turn. So what did I do? I grabbed my pink pig and I hit him with it. It was like a terrible thing that I did. And my grandma.
And this is when you were like 20 years old?
Yes. I was about 8 and he was about 9, 7, 8, 9,
Yeah.
8, 9.
Right,
so like around this age. So like I hit him with my hard plastic pink pig. And he starts crying. And my grandma comes in and she says, well, what's wrong? And we each tell our story. And my grandma goes, well, you should have listened. That was her lesson to us. Was not like, oh, that was a terrible thing you did. It was just, you should have listened to her.
It's kind of like Viserys. He didn't say you should have listened. He just is like, this shouldn't have happened. The kids fight.
Yeah.
You know?
Like that really was the end all be all of
it.
it.
Like they just didn't want to deal with it. Yeah. It's like, I knew I got to deal with this, but I don't really want to. Yeah. So go ahead, Sean. You had a lot of things to say here.
Yeah, I watched this. I watched the episode 3 times, and then watched this scene 2 more times because Rita was even kind of like, "Why does it matter? They're all doing the wrong. They're all going to kill each other. It doesn't matter who started it."
It's ominous, right? These are children fighting, and you know that when they're adults, it could probably be a lot worse. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know, for whatever reason, I felt like I wanted to know, or it might be a point of discussion, like who was at fault or who started it or whatever. And I do think that they were all doing wrong, bad things. But Aemon, for the most part, was just defending himself. Like maybe he was mean, right? Maybe he shouldn't have taken that dragon. And then he like called the girls pigs or whatever. But the response to meanness or name calling, I don't think should be violent assault. And that's what happened. One girl hits him. He shrugs it off. Second girl hits him.
No, that's not what happened.
He hits her back.
No, that's not what happened.
No?
First girl hits him, he hits her back immediately, then the second girl hits him. Yeah, she hit him back. He hit her back right away.
Yeah, Rhaena comes for him and doesn't really get him, and Aemon kind of like
lays her out,
shrugs her out.
Like, I thought his response was disproportionate. Yeah,
like he does.
She definitely threw the first.
Absolutely.
I said, I watched this like 5 times. Yeah. I think that he got hit one time by the younger, smaller one.
Yes,
and just like maybe pushed her down.
He pushed her to the ground. Then
the other girl hit him straight in the face, and then he hit her back in the face. Like he pushed her to the ground with her own momentum coming at him.
Yeah.
And then got hit in the face.
Well, okay, so
I agree with that, Sean.
You're right. The first punches I was talking about. You're talking about the shoves, which were almost nothing. The first punch was he responded to a punch with a much harder punch. But you're right that he didn't throw the first punch. That's true.
And then after that, he's getting 4-on-1. He's on the ground like poor Kriston Cole getting beat up by Harwin.
But these are Sean. This is an 8-year-old. This is 3 8-year-olds and a 6-year-old, and he's like 11 or 12 though. He's way bigger. Like you could see, he got up with all of them on him. He still got back up, and then he picked up a rock, and that's when I think it went. It took a turn.
I agree. It took a turn,
point,
and I think they're all doing wrong, bad things. Like he's big enough and older and strong. He should just shrug this off and leave or whatever, But he didn't go in and hit someone out of nowhere. You know what I mean?
No, he didn't.
He just like, hey, cool, I got a dragon. He maybe was expecting some support and excitement. And instead they're attacking him verbally and physically. And he's like, hey, get off of me. I got a rock. Stand back.
In that, he also says, I'm going to feed you to my dragon and of some other
And he says you're going to die screaming, and then he calls them bastards, which of course that's...
Die screaming like your father.
That's not just an insult.
Die screaming like your father in fire. Like, again, not just you're going to die screaming, but they're bringing up their dead father, calling him Lord Strong. The insults were extreme.
I think that's one thing you could say is the violence. You can argue both sides like they both did wrong, but they didn't say anything nearly as insulting, which is a big deal in this society, especially among royals, and especially the particular insults that were levied.
And again, I would point out they're kids. And so even if they shouldn't respond by hitting, they haven't learned that lesson. And maybe they also have power to their head. They're riding dragons too. Like for her to even assume she's getting that dragon maybe is a little bit of privilege. Like that was mine. You can't take it. Was it yours? I don't know if it belonged
No, it
to
wasn't
anybody.
hers. I don't think she had
and it's reasonable for her to assume that. But I think that these other kids probably have a similar amount of arrogance and quickness to violence, and it's through their parents. We saw Harwin attack someone. We saw Alicent attack someone. Like,
yeah, it's very
their
similar.
Parents are not the best role models. So.
I really love how it was all set up too. Going back to just how Vhagar's call could be heard throughout the funeral. Like you could hear her singing, and how that was talked about way back in episode 2 with Laena saying, like, you can hear the sailors hear her call, and etc. And it's usually Aemond who was the one like looking around, like paying more attention to it than anyone else. That was really cool. I like that.
Yeah, I did feel like that was maybe foreshadowing of the next scene.
Yeah. And just adding to Jace and Luke's frustration here as well, the bastard talk, especially Jace, it's been just unrelenting since they got there. Like the eulogy, their grandma not even looking at them. It's just, yeah, I would feel like this was very pent up as well at this point. Like he's like another person calling us bastards to our face or implying it or whatever. I don't know how Luke felt, because he said my father's still alive. So Luke, as you pointed out earlier, Luke was either still hasn't processed it or doesn't fully grasp it, but Jace seems to completely.
Yeah. Also worth pointing out the ages, just to be more clear with that. I think Aemond would be about 10 right here.
Only 10? Okay, I thought he was a little older.
We had a 10-year time jump, and Alicent hadn't had him yet. So
That's true.
He's got to be
right.
only about a 10. Whereas Jace is also like 11, 10. Like those two are like about the same age, but Jace is a little smaller looking to me.
Wait, well, Jace hadn't been born during the time jump either. He should be about...
Yeah, he's about the same age as Aemond,
right.
which is what I'm saying.
Saying
they're the same age.
He's not older, though.
He's not older. I don't. Like, if they are, maybe they're
younger.
within a few
He's definitely
months.
younger in the book.
Yeah,
he's definitely young. He's like 2 years younger than Aemond in the book.
Yeah, which is what not the case here. It seems they are about the same age, maybe within 6 months or a year apart. It would be my guess. Whereas Rhaena and Baela are about 8 years old. It seems, and obviously Luke,
which they're aged up
like
from the book.
6.
That's about 4 years older from this point in the books.
Just a little
and Joffrey, of course, is younger in the show and older in the book.
Yeah, in
he's
the book,
the one
Joffrey is involved in this.
He's the one that catches Aemond first and runs off to get his brothers.
But
he's the one who wakes them up rather than the girls waking up Jace. So it's very similar.
The same Joffrey that Kriston kills?
No,
young baby
Joffrey. Baby Joffrey.
Their brother,
the
one who was born last episode.
Okay.
Yeah. He's like 5 in the book version of this.
Okay.
Yeah, so
but he's still a baby here, yeah.
Yeah, he's just not in the episode.
That would have been funny had Joffrey Valerian's or Joffrey Lon was like, hey, someone's stealing Vhagar. Someone's stealing Vhagar. But if you keep the secret, we'll both like, no. Getting your plot lines mixed up, Joffrey. So yeah, the aftermath. Let's move on to the aftermath of that. Very powerful scene with an even more powerful aftermath. Like, what a run here in this episode. Just back-to-back incredible stuff. What's worse, harming a child or disinheriting one from the royal line? I don't know. That's kind of part of what this scene seeks to ask. High treason is a greater crime, but look at this kid. Like, that feels worse.
Yeah.
You know?
It feels a lot worse to me.
Hammond is just like taking it in stride, though. He's like, "Don't worry, mother."
He's in shock from the pain. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe a little milk of the poppy given to him or something. Viserys is in kind of a tough spot here. His son lost an eye, but he's not going to accept his grandson losing one. That's not an acceptable resolution to this. But he also can't accept the accusation that his grandson is not trueborn. Yet it's coming from his son. So it's like, what do I do? He resorts to his usual tactic. Yelling and demanding. Like, stop doing that. And usually there's no or else. This time there is an or else, which makes it a little interesting. So I have a question for you, Sean. Do you think he's going to follow through on this at some point? Do you think anyone's going to have their tongues pulled out over accusations of Strong? There's been a lot of people making these accusations. Is everyone just going to shut up now? Or what do you think? You got any predictions on that? What do you think?
I don't know. I thought about it a lot. Like, I think I said a couple episodes ago that I felt for Viserys, because I think what he's trying to do is keep his family and his realm happy and safe. And the problem is that, this question of inheritance, but he prioritizing these bigger picture things, and never mind like the prophecy or whatever, he's able to turn a blind eye to it. It's like, look, I know that this is like an embarrassment. It's a facade, but I'm okay with it. Why can't you be okay with it, Alicent? If everyone's just okay with it, then everything's okay. Your kids will be okay. Those kids will be okay. The realm will be okay if everyone's just okay. But Alicent and maybe some other people, for whatever reason, they just can't be. And so I felt like that was maybe what he was trying to, like, he's got everyone gathered around. He's like, we're all family, right? I mean, like, I'm the king and we're all family. You guys kind of have to do what I say. Who is it that said that he's a bastard? Who is it? Go speak up. And so on some level, maybe he's expecting everyone on the family to be on his side. Like, all of you should say, no one, they're not bastards. We'll play this game with you.
Yeah.
But they won't do it. It seems like they're mostly willing to, except you got these little kids involved, right? So Aemon, he kind of knows not to throw his mother under the bus, which I appreciate. He had sort of an awareness. Like, he looked at her, like, she's definitely where he's getting it from, right? Like, primarily, at least, maybe other places.
Well, as Aegon says, we all know, just look at them. Like, that's a big part of it, too. Yeah. But it was funny how Aegon's like,
throw his mom under the bus. Yeah. Aegon's already in trouble anyway. He's already supposed to be the king. He probably did hear from Aegon. So he's like, Aegon. And Aegon, I think, also handled it pretty well. Like, he wasn't really petulant or deny it, or he's like, look, Dad, we all know. I mean, look at him. Like, it's kind of like
he tries to reason with him. Yeah, he's like, look, Dad, this lie is too big for us all to swallow.
Yeah. and so then it's kind of out in the open. And I feel like what Viserys is doing there, like, maybe it's weak. Maybe he's not doing enough or saying enough. But I think he's trying to get everyone to understand what he's doing. Like, look, I'll freaking cut your tongues out. Play my game.
Yeah.
This is the rule. I'm the king. This is my game.
And if you don't play my game, it turns into war, which is one of the very few things I still appreciate about him, is that even though he doesn't do much about it other than point to it, none of these people seem to see where this is all is leading, except for maybe like Otto and Rhaenys and Viserys. Of all people, Viserys.
And Helena.
And maybe Helena. Yeah, Helena. The dreamer knows.
Or if they do see it, they're not worried about it. Like, they're too arrogant to think,
they think they can win.
Them,
I think they think it's worth it.
Well, they also, like, one of the themes of this episode is they're both right now looking into doing things that will intimidate into the other into backing down, as if that could ever work. They're both too bought in, but they're both trying to scare the other. Like, I need to intimidate. Yeah. Keep going, Sean. What else you got?
So I do think it's possible he cuts someone's tongue out, but I don't think he'll cut out his own son or his own wife's tongue,
Yeah.
But he might cut out Kristen Cole's tongue or Otto's tongue. I mean, I could see someone getting some punishment to be made an example of, but the fact that, like, let's say that Aegon says it again and random servant boy says it and they cut random servant boy's tongue out. Does that mean Aegon now doesn't say it? No, he feels more comfortable than ever saying it. He knows that he can get away with it.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about this in the idea of the idea of royals having a whipping boy being a thing historically. Yeah. There's a certain element where that can actually be effective if you have an empathetic young royal.
Just look at like Aegon is.
Yeah, if you cut the tongue out of someone that Aegon cares about who said it, then maybe that does. Again, my point is that sometimes. That can still be effective. There's a way
that being evil can have a good effect. Sure.
I guess. Like, it's
what do you call this one?
But the point remains that Aegon could still be bothered by that, even if he himself doesn't lose his tongue.
Or a person at least could. Yeah. I don't know if Aegon is that person.
I don't know about that.
What do you call this? It's not a whipping boy. It's a muting boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man.
So, he yells as Viserys' health declines. So does his ability to put energy into solving problems, which he never really put a lot of effort into in the first place. So there's just too many people here who aren't taking the king's will seriously. And sure, he's yelling now. They're listening for now. But when he dies, he's not going to be able to yell at them anymore. And they're not going to listen. They're not going to be like, we better stay with what Viserys wanted after he's dead.
Never mind when he dies, just when they go back home.
Yeah.
When they're not there in his presence, subject to his authority, when they're in their own castle, do you think they suddenly stop talking about it or wondering about it or plotting about it or whatever else,
Yeah, with this thin shield of peace, with Viserys keeping this all hanging by a thread, with the so-called gloves coming off, Alicent just outright demands Cole take Luke's eye. Even he won't go that far. I like his response. He's like, I'm your protector.
That was a good
she's like, you're sworn to me.
Yeah. You're sworn. He's like, I'm your protector, not your
sworn to protect you. I'm not your sworn protector, not your sworn assassin.
Yeah, I'm not your tongue cutter.
And you'll note, Harold Westerling didn't seem to know what he thought was going to happen.
Yeah,
there.
he looked over at him.
Cocks an eyebrow and looks at him like, what's he going to say here? And he was like, oh, pleasantly surprised or pleasantly pleased by it, it seems to me.
Yeah, I agree. More on him in a second, because I think it's really interesting, like, keeping track of what everyone does when she grabs the dagger. But let's build up to that real quick. Sean, you have something else to add?
It's also, just another interesting irony that Alicent told Kriston last episode, I've got to believe that decency will prevail. And so here he's demanding this indecency. It's like a role reversal. Like, hey, I'll protect you. I'm not going to cut a boy's tongue out.
And then it gets worse at the
You want a decency, right?
Then it gets even worse at the end with Larys, but we'll get to that. So it's a really huge culmination. She's been mad at Rhaenyra for so long, all the things she's been mad about since they were girls. And then in between, like, all this frustration, resentment, paranoia on top of that, just exploding. It's like an example. It's like, see, my father's right. Like, my son loses an eye and nothing's going to happen. No one's going to get punished over this. What else can I expect? Like, if it was worse, would it have also been like, if he had been killed, would they still have done nothing? I mean, and she's obviously not thinking completely clearly, but she's got some legitimate grievances here. But a lot of it is just built up grievance from 10 years worth. She's not mad only about the eye. She's mad about like 1,000 things at once, and it's all coming out at once because she's always been keeping it back. She's always been somewhat composed. Yeah. And she knows that she lost that later. She laments that loss of composure and expresses what a big deal it's going to be for her reputation going forward. But
I think for viewers, that's sometimes where it gets hard too. Is that like in a vacuum, I feel like we should all be very much team Alicent's son just lost an eye. She deserves retribution. She deserves justice. She deserves something for she's in the right.
Not the type of justice she wants. But
yeah, not the type of thing she wants, but. In a vacuum, it seems like she's right, but as viewers, we know that she's got other motivations, and it's really hard for viewers to separate that knowledge and to judge Alicent just for this event, in which, again, she's a mother whose child was attacked and lost an eye. I really think she's in the right here, but she is motivated by wanting to disinherit these young boys. So we just know it's the same kind of thing, I guess, with Otto as the Hand of the King, where it's like even if he was giving the right advice, you can't trust him at all.
Even if she has ulterior motives, also her son just lost an eye, right? Yeah. And I think she deserves at least some sort of sympathy, or I don't know, a pass for the day or something. Maybe like she's asking too much to also want retribution. Although many people wouldn't necessarily think, especially in this role, wouldn't think that's asking too much. But even if you think she is asking too much at this moment, you got to understand why she would ask that at this moment. Like, not even counting like the years of paranoia and mistrust and conniving among everyone, but just her son having lost an eye, I feel excuses a lot of irrational, inappropriate behavior.
And Otto does give her a pass, and so does Viserys, basically. They both are just like, Otto's
do give her the pass.
Yeah.
And she felt very bad at the end of the day, too. She felt guilty and ashamed over what she had done. She didn't think that their eyes showed them. And she felt like, oh, my God, I can't believe what I did. Right. Mm-hmm. So, again, in the big picture, she might turn out to be a villain. She might have some ulterior motives, but I don't know.
Yeah.
The thing that
want to be on her side when I'm trying to justify her.
And that's the core of Game of Thrones, right? At the heart of it. We're not supposed to just unilaterally dismiss everything someone does as all evil or all good. There's always like something we can sympathize with, even when
at least understanding. Even if you disagree, you understand why they did it, if nothing else.
The thing that gets me here, though, that I would like to have seen a little more time spent on is the involvement of Baela and Rhaena in this, because they are clearly bloodied up. Like, they have clearly been involved in the scrap. Yeah. And there is a certain amount of chivalry in this world where I feel like it should matter that these two girls were beaten up. Even if we saw and we know that they attacked first, I feel like that should have been brought up more, especially by Corlys and Rhaenys, who are they're defenders here. But it really just seems to get ignored in the shuffle of he lost an eye, he got a broken nose, he called them bastards. Like, I don't feel like Corlys and Rhaenys spoke up and said, hey, Aemond attacked my granddaughters, or said anything clear enough about
I'm not sure
that.
they had a chance to, because Viserys shut the whole thing down.
Yeah, that's true.
Like that may have been a natural evolution of the scene if it had gotten to that point. But Viserys is like, okay, everyone's going to bed now. He like didn't allow anything further to be said. But I mean, you're making a good point. But I think there's a reason. Maybe
there might have also been some smaller scale, I don't know, airing of grievances before everyone was all together, right?
Yeah, maybe.
And it might have also been a tricky thing for the writers to fit in appropriately with everything. On one hand, I agree. It seems like it should be a factor, but I can see why they didn't include it on screen.
Yeah. So let's talk about the actual moment. So 10 years of frustration boils forth. She snatches the dagger. It's kind of interesting that she does that. It's in Fire and Blood, not this moment. But there's other spots in Fire and Blood where she grabs a dagger from a guard and does something. So it's kind of neat to see that just used a little differently. It was something that they've been doing a lot of, taking like single lines and using that behavior elsewhere to show that maybe it's a pattern. Some very important lines. Where is duty? Where is sacrifice? Really well written, very like almost Shakespearean perhaps. I say that not knowing Shakespeare very well. It just feels that way. And Rhaenyra has that also very famous response. Now they see you as you are, but she's whispering it. And I think that's intended to goad her further. Kind of like how Kristen Cole was goading Harwin. It's a mirror to that moment. And it shows that Rhaenyra is a lot more aware of what's happening in the scene. She's kind of on top of the moment and realizes that Alicent is losing it and is like, I can play this up, make her lose it even more. Because they both know how much is on the line here perception-wise. What we call optics in the modern world. Alicent, as we just described, Alicent totally realizes how badly she screwed up there, how badly it looks. Regardless of right or wrong, it looked terrible on her behalf, and she knows it.
She at least had, I don't know, ostensibly had the moral high ground, right? Like,
but she lost. She kind of threw it away, right?
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah,
she kind of squandered it on the level of revenge.
She squandered her moral high ground on giving Rhaenyra a scar on the arm.
Yeah. It was an eye for an arm cut. Yeah, which needed to be threaded together. Yeah,
it didn't like solidify her son's position or safety. It didn't get her. It was like pretty much for nothing. And I also thought it was a little ironic that Rhaenyra's line, like when she says now everyone sees you as you are, what she means is just like the rest of us, right? Because it's not like Rhaenyra is this bastion of morality and Alicent is faking it, right? Like they're all fucking screwing up. Sorry, screwing up left and right. And but Alicent, at least on the surface, seems not to be. Yeah. She's doing everything she's supposed to. Until now.
Yeah, and it's part of the goading, I think. She's like, look, everyone, look how embarrassing this is for you. Yeah, which is why I think she whispered it rather than yelling, like, now everyone sees you as you are. Because she's like, you can see, that's why I'm saying, like, Rhaenyra kind of knew what she was doing in that moment, whereas Alicent's just
if
like,
she
frantic
yells that out, then now she's also bringing herself down a notch.
Yeah.
You're just doing this to make a point. Okay, you're just as bad as her.
But she just looks like she's defending her kid. She looks like she's kind of brave, stepping in front of the knife and getting cut.
And she's keeping her cool, and she says something calmly. Even if someone could hear it, it was still calm.
It did look good. Yeah, it made Rhaenyra look pretty good in a lot of ways, even though, like from a distance, whereas from a distance, Alicent, as Alicent says, she's like, people are going to think I'm mad. People are going to start whispering that I'm mad. And I was like, yep, they are. That's what they're doing. You're totally right. And Otto, there's more mirroring. Otto says in that moment when they talk about it afterwards, when it's just the two of them, he says, you see her as she is. So they have the kind of back and forth there. She also says the king will continue to have her sympathies. Like, I basically forced people to take her side. I made it. Like you said, she lost the moral high ground there. And Rhaenyra really effectively refers to Alicent's cloak of self-righteousness, which that was a really brilliant line as well. And clearly Rhaenyra has built up frustration towards Alicent as well. They're both airing their grievances, but Rhaenyra did it more politically, more smoothly, I guess. I'm moving on to the same scene, but a different angle here. How the interactions fall out, like as the violence breaks out, what people do. It's really interesting to see, like how people react to it. Rhaenys steps in front of Baela and Rhaena, again showing where her focus is. Rhaenyra jumps in front of Jace and Luke because I mean the threat to Luke is a little more direct there. Knife, ordering his eye cut out, then Alicent actually trying to do it. And Daemon jumps in front of Criston Cole as well. Criston Cole starts moving, and Daemon jumps in front, and then some Kingsguard hold Cole back even more. Westerling says, stay near the king, and does so himself because that's his first priority. He's like, yeah, she took the dagger, but she's going over there, so I'm staying with the king. That's my primary duty. So that was like his security protocols kicking in, I suppose. Like, stick to the king. But the factions.
I can imagine everyone's a little quick to make sure Criston doesn't flip out.
Yeah, they're like, wait, that guy's the real wild card here. I saw what he did last time with just his fist. Yeah, even though it was 10 years ago, still. So yeah, so like it's like the battle lines are drawn here in this moment. It's amazing. Like you can see the blacks and greens just standing on both sides. Like only Viserys' thin shield of I'm still in charge keeps them from going at it. Maybe right in that moment. And it all while the biggest weapons of war are being claimed by these two sides. Vhagar for the Greens, Daemon for Rhaenyra. Like those are the two main weapons that are claimed for their sides. Luminia M says, so happy to catch you all live. I love History of Westeros. Well, thank you, Luminia. That's a shout out from I think Canada there.
We've got over 700 people live right now.
Nice. Awesome. That's great. Thank you all. We appreciate those numbers.
Worth saying, if we get 1,000 live, I think we're on tap to have Sean dance on screen. We'll say it again.
That's
There's
true.
only 300 away. It could happen.
That is true.
I'll do it for $999.
You can,
or if I get 700 new followers on Twitter. Sean.
Luminia didn't submit a question, but we appreciate the sentiment. You can always submit questions with your super chats, and we will take care of those answers. I think this scene is meant to have a lot of vibes from the Castle Derry scene in A Game of Thrones, both book and show, where Arya and Joffrey are put on trial and Sansa loses Lady. The death of Lady is very similar to Alicent asking for an eye. If Alicent was asking for a wolf to be killed, Viserys might have been like, okay. Not if a dragon was killed.
Viserys would have been like, okay, weird ask, but all right.
But kill
I'll
the wolf.
Go find a wolf.
That'll make you feel better. I mean, I'd gladly sacrifice a wolf just to have peace here. Like, that's weird, though. Like, where do we get a wolf? This is an island. But, so that's real similar vibes there. Also, with the way it ends, Robert just finally just leaves with Ned being like, dude, this is incomplete. Like, you can't just expect this to be justice. And Viserys is like, Viserys ends he ends it a different way. Rather than leaving, he just tells everyone this is over. It's a little more aggressive, but it's a similar style ending where he sweeps it under the rug. It's a little different form of sweeping under the rug, but it's still sweeping it under the rug.
He might be sweeping under the rug, but he's making it clear he cares about this.
Yeah, that's true.
Like,
you're right.
You all need to sweep this under the rug. Robert's like, oh, whatever.
Ned doesn't care. Yeah, or Robert doesn't care. But one of the most, I think, and I have to double check because I haven't had time to look it up because again we do this so quickly after the episode. Corlys comes in and says, "What is the meaning of this?" Pretty darn sure that's exactly what Ned says when he comes in. What is the meaning of this? Why wasn't my daughter brought to me right away? Because they're already they're already holding court and deciding what's to happen before Ned even gets there. And this is all happening in Corlys' hall. He's like, what are all you people doing in my high hall, like doing stuff? Like, I'm still in my pajamas. Like, what is all this? Like, he's so confused, but clearly something big has happened.
This happened twice to Corlys in this episode.
Yeah.
My house?
How many? Yeah, in front of my salad?
Yeah.
So this has happened a lot. People push Viserys, and there's very little consequence. So this time he does attach that consequence about the tongues, but we already discussed that. Moving forward, let's see here. We've got some. Let me just run through all these examples of mirroring because I thought there was a particularly high number. Not only was this episode so quotable, but the use of mirroring I thought was particularly extreme in a good way. I love mirroring, so that's a good thing. Let me just run through the ones I caught, and feel free to comment others if you think I missed one. As Aemon claims Vhagar, Rhaenyra claims Daemon, and again, Daemon and Aemon have so much in common. Daemon and Rhaenyra's marriage is a mirror in many ways, as they are so alike to each other, as Daemon and Viserys are not. Remember our conversation before about mom always liked you best. Daemon took more after his mother. Viserys is the firstborn, but Daemon was more like his parents. Now they see you as you are versus you see her for who she is, the Otto line and the Rhaenyra line. Cole goading Harwin versus Rhaenyra goading Alicent. Cole's offer to run away with Rhaenyra versus Laenor getting to run away with Carl. Hat tip to Joe Magician for that one. I didn't catch that, but he tweeted about that yesterday, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a good one. Of course, there's a lot of differences between those circumstances, but it's still pretty similar. Running off together, never being seen again, etc. The Strong funeral happening off screen apparently that's going on. Jace expressed a wish to be there, so apparently there's off-screen mirroring of that funeral happening. And again, the deaths are by fire. Yeah, Larys didn't go to his own family's funeral, I guess. Maybe that funeral was happening a different time, but still.
Yeah, I assume the funeral has probably already happened. Like,
maybe
a certain amount of time has got to have passed for them to gather everyone up and travel to this other island and put this whole ceremony together. It can't be like a 1 or 2 day thing.
No.
Definitely,
So,
you're right. Yeah, a lot of travel. Yeah,
I can imagine there's still like some mourning or some aftermath to deal with that maybe Larys should be involved with back at this castle he's the lord of, and his father and brother having dead, but he clearly doesn't care enough. And it might have been Jace kind of just like still frustrated that he didn't get to go to the funeral 5 days ago or 10 days ago or something. But I'm assuming that it's not actually happening at the same moment.
Yeah. Also, just mirroring in characters, Laena and Laenor, Baela and Rhaena just being similar and having mirror images of themselves and of their families. The blacks facing the greens facing the blacks in that moment in the Great Hall when they all kind of come together and the kind of symbolically take sides there before the real side taking takes place somewhat later. An interesting one I almost forgot is Laenor and Aegon, of all characters to compare. They're the two who get the drunkest, but for very opposite reasons. Aegon because he's completely disinterested. Laenor because he's completely overcome. Super, like more interested than anyone. And he's the most sad of all, probably, in this moment. Chad Summerchild says, the Alicent actress claims she's in love with Kristen Cole. Mentioned it in an interview. There was a cutscene.
I wanted to bring up 2 things about that. One,
another piece of jealousy.
Yes, Emily Carey did say that Alicent, part of why she had been upset with Rhaenyra was she had this crush on Kristen Cole, which we really haven't seen represented on screen. So you have to wonder, my theory is that maybe like the cut scene of Alicent getting ready for her marriage to Viserys, maybe she says something to Rhaenyra like, I wish I was marrying like a young handsome man like Kristen, or maybe just like a line, I don't know. But the funny thing about that to me,
sort of looked at him like that, like in the tournament when they first saw him.
Yeah,
I thought she
like,
sort of
he's
had
Dornish,
like, he's
but
Dornish. But I don't know, maybe that wasn't a lot, but I thought it was something.
So
She did seek him out after
I had 2 thoughts here.
the beating.
So one is Emily Carey has said that about Kristen. Emily Carey and Millie Alcock and Emma all of them have also made comments about Alicent and Rhaenyra having a sapphic undertone between them. And notably, Fabian Frankel had an interview where he talked about how Matt Smith, when they were filming the tourney scene with Kristen and Daemon, Matt Smith said, well, maybe they're flirting a little, maybe like, and he brought up so basically all the cast is
Everyone's
just reading all these headcanons into romance between them, and
That's awesome.
Good for them. Have more fun with it. I don't know, I ship it. Kristen and Daemon, sure, let's go for it. Let's do it, team.
There was definitely a little more of by Daemon in this one, like the way he leans in on Carl, and
that
was very suggestive.
He just, and if you don't know what we're talking about, there was a moment last week where Daemon has a charged moment with a waiter, a server, where he like grabs his arm.
The one that looked like Dave Grohl.
Yeah, the one that looked like Dave Grohl. And then we saw behind the scenes another moment where like this guy was sitting almost basically on Daemon's lap.
Yeah, it was a lot more.
Like a lot more. And so it seems like that was something that was cut. So that's what we're talking about when we reference by Daemon. Yeah. Matt Smith has his agenda to make Daemon sexually fluid, I think.
Yep. So speaking of Carl and Laenor, let's talk about that. That's our next topic here. Laenor goes to stand in the sea. He's so overcome. I don't know why this upsets Corley so much. How did you all interpret this moment? Corley was mad that he's out there. Maybe he expected him to have more decorum, but I don't I'm not clear on why he was upset by this. He got very mad. He's like, "Go get him! Bring him in.
Get your patron.
Yeah, get your patron." I didn't quite get that.
Yeah, I didn't fully get it, but it was another moment of frustration with Corlys for me. I was like,
let him grieve.
Yeah, or even if for whatever reason you don't think he should be doing this.
Yeah.
Why are you drawing extra attention to it?
Yeah, like,
why are
just
you
do it under the...
you loudly, angrily, publicly getting his lover to go retrieve him? Why don't you pull someone aside? Why don't you go do it yourself?
Yeah.
Why don't you get someone else who's more appropriate? I feel like he just makes really bad plays oftentimes.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say I think Corlys was embarrassed to see Laenor having a show of emotion like that and being a drunken sot type thing.
Maybe
being
the drunkenness
drunken
might be his problem.
And so he had a show of emotion.
Yeah.
Which is what I don't
you
get.
make a good point here, Sean.
Why
yeah.
Corlys would send his son's lover to deal with this. If he cares about appearances, I don't think you should send Carl and tell him so in such again, I agree with you, Sean. It was a weird choice on Corlys' part.
Yeah. He's like, it's like, I'm going to show how important decorum is by losing decorum. Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Maybe it's, I haven't thought to describe his personality. I don't think we've talked about that specifically, but maybe hot-headed. If we had to, I think hot-headed might be a way to describe him. He's took his ball and went home early on to went to war with Daemon when he couldn't get
Well,
the
he's very
marriage he
proud. I think
wanted.
pride describes a lot of that, or at least helps describe a lot of that. Okay, so Laenor. Let's talk about Laenor. This was really interesting. A lot of twists. Well, one really big twist. Two twists, really, as part of it. So he becomes egg, kind of. he shaves his Valyrian hair and escapes. It's a surprisingly
goes undercover.
Yeah,
okay, so before we say anything more on this, Sean, do you think we're going to see Laenor again as our unsullied?
I don't. Let me, if I may.
I'm glad you asked him first. Good call, Shea.
Yeah, before you say a thing to influence him.
My first thought was that that Daemon, probably without Rhaenyra's understanding or approval, arranged to have Laenor killed. And then maybe with Rhaenyra's approval.
Well, Rhaenyra's would have brought it up, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, she was speculating on what we could do, kind of like Alicent was speculating, what can we do? And Larys was like, oh,
I don't think that was speculating.
I disagree completely.
Yeah, I
with
disagree
your
completely.
take already.
She was saying it needs to happen.
Definitively wanted to do this. Okay.
Yes, because he goes, Laenor will have to die first. She goes, I know. It wasn't like a suggestion. It was like, and then they go about talking. When the screen, the scenes kind of overlap.
Yeah. But no, I think very clearly to me, Rhaenyra and Daemon were involved in this fake death. They faked the death.
Yeah, I don't see any reason to separate their knowledge on this.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I was going to say that she might have, even if it was dark, this is my thought, was they were going to be opportunists. Next time there's a war, or let's get him into a war, or something like that. But then clearly, okay, they're just going to do it now. Daemon goes and talks to Carl. But I still wondered if Daemon was just going forward with his plan, how much Rhaenyra knew. As it progressed, it seemed like she was still involved.
Well, how would he have
involved with
then why would he not be dead? Then why would Daemon, if Rhaenyra wasn't involved, then why would he
very
clearly. Carl gets this mission from Daemon. This is something I thought might be the case. I don't necessarily think it now. But Carl gets this mission for Daemon, which included hey, you can run off and no one will know or care. And was if I can run off and no one will know or care, so can Laenor. So, hey, Laenor, let's fake your death and get the heck out of here.
Okay,
that he was protecting Laenor from Daemon's murderous plot.
I wanted to say, you're not alone there, Sean. A lot of other people also think it's possible that this was not Daemon and Rhaenyra's plan, that this was Carl taking agency for themselves. I think if that was the case, that might have been better represented on screen, and I think it would have been a good choice if there had been agency from Carl and Laenor in this. But my take on it is that Rhaenyra is accepting, maybe I need to have my husband killed, but she doesn't want to do it. She says you're a good and honorable man. She cares about Laenor. She doesn't want to. And so her and Daemon come up with this plan to fake his death, which also involves killing an innocent person.
Which is why I think they had to be involved.
But that's why they're involved, is because Daemon kills the decoy. That's how I know I have no doubt that I think Daemon and Rhaenyra were involved in the planning, is because Daemon kills the decoy body that they put into the fire, and as is how the whole thing works.
Yeah, how would they put in the decoy? If Damon's role in the decoy, there's no way around him being involved.
So to continue on, they've staged their whole fight, where they make sure that the young kid, that a witness comes and sees them get in the fight, so that there's no questions from Corlys and Rhaenys, because Daemon and Rhaenyra do care a bit about that part of things. Like, they want to be feared by the realm, is what they're saying. Like, this serves them for people to think this is the case. It does not serve them for Corlys and Rhaenys to think that they were involved. So they need Corlys and Rhaenys to not suspect them.
Right. That's why I think they needed to have witnesses and a person that killed them to be someone that's not attached to Daemon or whoever. And by the way, I do think in the end, especially because Daemon did seem to be helping with the plot,
the decoy part is a pretty big.
He must be. But although to be fair, it is possible that he was helping Laenor get in there and still didn't know
get into
exactly
his own
what Laenor
castle. That's his own castle. Laenor lives there. That's like he's the heir to that castle. Remember, he walks in. He's like, "How did you get?" He says, "Remember, he walks in and says, 'How did you get in here?' to Karl," which is a weird thing to say to his lover, unless they're setting up you're an intruder.
So that's how it points to me that Laenor knows as well to set up this whole fight. That's why Karl slaps him open face across
instead of like a real punch, he slaps him. It was like, that's not how
now, all this said, by the way, I do think in the end, it is at least most likely that Daemon planned for Laenor to not be killed, probably because that's part of what Rhaenyra wanted, etc. But all that said, my suspicion is that we aren't going to see Laenor again. My guess is, tell me if I'm wrong, that's not how it went down in the books.
Correct.
And they're trying to prevent falling into this trope of the gay person always dies. I think that they were going to just get him out of the story without killing him. And
you might be right.
More thoughts from me on that. Yes, absolutely. They are trying to avoid the bury your gays trope, which is a very real trope and something I was dreading the public reaction to. So I think it was a good choice to avoid that. But there are ramifications that it has for things that have to happen later in the story. We're not going to get into that in this stream, but one thing will pose the question of, well, what about Laenor's dragon Sea Smoke? He's got a dragon still. What is going to happen with that dragon? That's an open question for everyone that, again, we're going to get into on Saturday, but I want to tease some of that a little bit. My thought here is that we heard Laenor in the previous episode. Laenor brings up the Stepstones. He keeps bringing up the Stepstones. And he brings up a Tyrashi captain general named Racalio Rendoon, who is a giant, has a big beard, and wears women's frocks. And Laenor is quite delighted at this idea. My theory is that we're going to follow Laenor to the Stepstones eventually and meet Racalio Rendoon, who has this queer element to him that I think could have a lot of emotional resonance with the Laenor and Karl plotline as two gay men, and Racalio being this like gender fluid, cross-dressing person. I feel like there could be something really interesting there. And maybe still Laenor does die eventually, but it isn't really the same thing as just burying your gays.
Maybe he just dies in the Stepstones.
Because he gets an arc of his own, and that's better. So my theory, and the thing I want personally, is to see Laenor and meet Racalio Rendoon, who's been mentioned in the show, and by Laenor again. So I think that that's foreshadowing for this idea. So I'm on board with seeing Laenor again.
It also occurred to me that this idea that, there's other lands you could go to and people don't care about your name. Yeah, Tyrion went there. He wasn't exactly safe, right? Like, there's people will come after him. I feel like
why? Why would they come after him?
If he killed the son of the second most prominent family of Westeros,
Karl.
the king.
Karl.
Yeah, Karl.
Right, Karl is not safe.
Sure, Karl's not safe. But yeah, that might be true.
Okay, so there's my other thought. Is that in the preview for next week, they say that Corlys was injured fighting in the Stepstones in this time gap. Well, is it possible that Corlys ends up finding out the truth about Laenor being alive when he is in the Stepstones?
Or just in all. My theory is there's a very good chance that Daemon and Rhaenyra just tell them the truth because they're such important allies. And they've just killed, if they want their cake and to have it too, and to eat it too, which is they want people to fear them for what they seem to have done. How are Corlys and Rhaenys not going to be among the people that think it was them? Like, there's no way to segregate them from this belief, this rumor. So, hang on. So, they could just tell them. They could say, "Look, he's actually alive. We sent him away." That's one way to maybe get out of that, but maybe not. On the other hand, they may not have to because it's still there. All their family are still on this side, no matter what. Like Baela and Rhaena are still Daemon's kids. Jace, Luke, Joffrey are their relatives, even if Rhaenys isn't excited about that. Corlys is. And they definitely hate the Greens. This isn't going to send them to the Greens, So
it's also, aside from whatever sort of plotting or perception or whatever, they think their daughter and son have now died. Like it just seems like a kind thing to do, to tell them the truth. It seems like a very mean thing, even if the death is fake. To the people that care about them, it's real, and that includes Corlys and Rhaenys, right? Yeah. So that's a really mean, like, however mean Aemond was when he came in, like, you're like a pig. I killed your parents. Like,
you just killed your parents and aren't telling you the truth. Yeah, like Baela and Rhaena are got to be like, that's their uncle, and Jason, especially Luke, who thinks that was his real dad. Right, pretty bad. All right. Shall we move on to the next part?
Also, I wanted to say I did run a poll on whether we would see Laenor again. It's 50-50 on Twitter with like 500 votes. And so like people are super split. Like I can't believe how even it literally is, like 49-51% or something like that.
Oh yeah, actually one other thing. So yeah, in the book, it's.
I should run a poll in the chat. I realize
it's unambiguous in the book. Sean, Carl Corey stabs Laenor at a public fair, like out in the market, like with a lot of people around. There's just no ambiguity at all. And then he escapes, and what happens to him after is ambiguous. He may have been murdered to cover up who paid him, or he may have escaped.
Yeah.
And but Daemon is implicated, or rumored, not
is
implicated.
It known who paid him, or that someone paid him?
It is suggested that Daemon paid him, but it's definitely not proven. Okay. It's like a rumor. It's like, well, people was like, well, because they look at who was motivated, and since Daemon immediately
die in the streets.
Yeah, it's his funeral. It's his funeral that they're gathered for, not Laena's. Because he was the king consort. He was higher ranked. That Laena's funeral in the book isn't quite as big a deal to the whole realm. It's a huge deal to the family, obviously, but it's not used. It's Laenor's funeral they're gathered for. This equivalent event where all the dragons are gathered and all that. So similar.
By the way, I want to say I know I'm unsullied. I don't know the details of how this plays out. I haven't read the books. I'm trying to avoid knowing too much, but I still speculate on what's going to happen. And Rita was picking my brain. She's like, what do you think's going to go down? How's it going to happen? And I said that I thought that something's going to happen to make everyone come together, all the families, all the antagonists, and someone's going to say something that they're not supposed to say, and it's going to blow up. And it's almost exactly what happened in this episode.
Yeah, you're right.
I feel like I should have also guessed that this funeral might be it too.
Yeah. But yeah, that is a good call. You're right. Someone saying something, someone calling someone a bastard, or
really. Thing about this Laenor thing is that's really funny to me, by the way, is that it puts us back in Game of Thrones territory of Gendry rowing.
Yeah, she's just gonna row.
It's just like forever wondering what's up with Laenor. The
lost heir to Driftmark.
So I'm hoping for an interview behind the scenes or some comment from someone that gives us an answer one way or another, like, yes, you will see Laenor again, or no, you will not, because I would prefer to not just be constantly wondering for seasons, like, is this the time that we see Laenor?
Yeah.
It's a weird boat to be in as a theorist.
In the book, no also, I think the Sea Snake offers a massive reward for information about Carl for what he did or whatever. I think it's like 10,000 dragons or something really hugely obscene like that.
Yeah, what I would like out of this is to really see a plot line with Corlys, and if we see him in the Stepstones, and maybe he's there because he does want to catch Carl, or he like I would like to see this followed up on. That's what would give me that would make me feel better about it. It's a change I'm fully for, but I have a feeling that they changed it after the fact because the original leaks did not have this, and so I think that it tested poorly, or maybe they kept it super secret, or maybe they changed their mind because maybe they were like, oh, this is going to be a lot of drama. People are like, this is going to distract from how good our show is. If people are just like, oh, it's bury your gaze. Sometimes that's just the better choice, is to avoid the needless drama. And
you could see how they would have done that too, because it would be seamless the way they talk about it. It's just you're trying to trick the audience, and then, oh, look at that, he gets away. Nothing that happened before that really, except maybe the slap, really, show, like, you could have done it a different way. I don't know. Maybe I don't know, the body replacement thing as well. I don't know.
Like Yeah, so I would be curious to read interviews and behind the scenes discussion of this, because I think that'll give us a lot of clarity to how it all went down. Like, I don't think we can speculate too much on some things, but yeah, let us know in the comments I want to know, one, if you think we'll see Laenor again, and I want to know, two, whether you want to see Laenor again, because I think people are right that those are two different questions, whether you think they'll do it or whether you want it. I both think they'll do it and want it. But I would say I'm like 60%.
I don't want it.
I'll say I'm like 60% that I think they'll do it. So I don't feel strongly. I just think it makes sense to give us like for us to give us that perspective on the action and the stepstones again. Like, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, we'll see.
It gives them an opening for another spinoff. You know, there's a lot of potential.
Where in the world is Carl Corey? Carl Corey. Yeah, where in the world? All right, let's talk about how to train your dragon person. Let's talk about how to and how not to approach Daemon when you're using the word need. Viserys tells Daemon, it's time you came home. You can have a place at my court if that's a need. And Daemon is like, need? I need nothing, and walks away. Meanwhile, Rhaenyra is like, Daemon, I need you, uncle. That's the correct way to do it. It's like one of those graphics where it's like, wrong? Right. You know, Rhaenyra understands, and it makes sense. Rhaenyra is more like Daemon than Viserys is like Daemon. They have a lot more in common. It gets him back in the game. It's like Laena's prophecy came true. Like, this is where you wanted to be all along. You wanted to be in the game, fighting for legacy, or just fighting. I don't know. They go on their beach walk. They hook up. Notably, Daemon has no trouble there. You know, no erectile dysfunction. That seems to be maybe a thing of the past for him. Didn't seem to have any trouble with Laena either, presumably, given they had kids. So
we'll assume those are his kids. I guess we'll assume.
Safe assumption.
I don't look anything like him. Yeah. No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. To be clear. Cut that.
So it's another example of mirroring, like, of the inverse, the way to do it versus the way not to do it. And Viserys is probably sad. Like, I feel bad for him. I mean, I felt bad for him many times, but he's seeing his family falling apart. He has all the agency, but none of the ability to stop it. He knows he's not going to live to see old age. Otto has expressed that elsewhere, and we know it's true. Like, yeah, he's
going to see
guy.
Old age, but at like 40.
Yeah, his old age is younger than most people's old age.
He's going to see what old age would be like if he had made it to that old.
Like, Sean, you and me are older than him, you know?
That's weird.
Yeah.
Can you imagine going climbing with King Viserys?
Yeah, I was going to say... I'm glad we look good for our ages. I don't know what he's doing wrong.
I think after the next time jump, he'll be a good bit older than us. But right now, we're close. Okay, here's a great moment as well. He is so set on peace, even though he's not great at forming it. He's got the right focus. This also brings us back to very early a Game of Thrones, where Ned says something kind of Alicent-like, which is... to Littlefinger, he's like, do you want me to make peace with the people who tried to kill my son? And Littlefinger's like, we only try to make peace with our enemies. Like, who else are we going to make peace with? You know? And what's standing between them? The cat's paw dagger. Because that's the weapon that was used to go after Bran that Joffrey paid for to be done there. And it's very similar to Alicent and Aemond and the dagger and... not wanting to make peace and being like, look, you did this to my child. There's no going back now. And it's kind of odd how the roles are reversed there. Like, Ned being the one who's like, no, there's no going back. And Littlefinger being the one suggesting peace. Yeah.
By the way, how long has Viserys been king now?
Since 101, it's about 123. Or not 101, about 103. So about 20 years. About 20 years, yeah.
20 years. Like, I'm not sure if the United States has gone 20 years in a row without being at war.
No, well.
I want to give him credit. Yeah. He's doing a good job keeping peace. 20 years? That's good.
Well, they've definitely gone longer than 20 years without civil war. Like, arguably, the war in the Stepstones is kind of like, I don't know. It wasn't unsanctioned.
That was Daemon. That was the rogue prince.
But he did send official troops over there. And they never actually fought.
I suppose he did.
But, well, maybe they did, because that wasn't the end. That was just the end of the crab feeder. It's unclear. But you're right. It's a good point, regardless. Mm-hmm. So, So Viserys is kind of misunderstood, I think, that people continue to mistake how he needs to be talked to. Alicent gets it sometimes, but other times she kind of forgets. Otto particularly understands. He knows Viserys perhaps better than anyone how to properly talk to him. And his prediction when Alicent are talking and him are talking afterwards comes to bear, which is, so let's jump to that, the so-called Greens aftermath, I'm calling this section. Alicent is embarrassed about her outburst. She knows she's harmed her reputation. We mostly talked about this already. People are going to think she's mad or violent towards children. Otto agrees with her. He's like, yep, people are going to think that. But I'm happy you showed your steel here. And he says that, look, all this time I didn't think you had the determination that you're showing now. And now I'm actually confident in you for once. And so it's weird. It's really a real metaphor for praising the wrong behavior, right? Like how the Game of Thrones forces you into compromising your morals and doing things that you know are wrong, but it's for survival in a way, even though you're really powerful. Like the juxtaposition of being extremely powerful yet also fighting for survival, which is normally something that only, that having power normally keeps you from having to fight for survival. So yeah, it's all very kind of backwards in a sense.
I don't think we mentioned it. We mentioned it in our synopsis video, but it also makes me think of Alicent also had a little bit of an embarrassing moment at the funeral wake when Viserys calls her Emma.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
right?
I forgot about that. Yeah, I did mention that earlier.
In terms of forgetting yourself.
Literally, yeah. It just shows his mental faculties are declining as well as his physical, yeah.
Thins the shield that we've referred to a few times. The one thing kind of standing in the way from everything blowing up is Viserys, but he's barely keeping it together. So.
Yeah, and that's a great point. That shield everyone sees that shield as limited, as short term, as well. We better get ready because this won't be around much longer. I think the book fandom, it was given a nod in this moment when Alicent's talking about how people think about her now. It's like almost fourth wall breaking. She's like, well, this is what people think of me. It's like, yeah. That is what people think.
It has been this weird thing in the fandom to see book readers and show people who have these very different opinions of Alicent, and a lot of show viewers are taken aback, like she hasn't done any of these things that you're claiming she's done, and book readers really seem to think, I'm sorry to say, that it makes them righteous to spoil people. Like, it's been a really, I don't remember Game of Thrones spoilers ever being like this in the fandom, where people were seemingly big fans of the series and taking pleasure in quote tweeting and replying with huge, massive spoilers. Yeah. I don't know. Clearly no one in the chat is like that, but you're right, Aziz, though, that when Alicent says that, that is how different fans think of her. Yeah. And I think all three of us, Sean is an Unsullied. She
could have winked at the camera when she said that.
As an Unsullied, Sean is really not tied down to that. But I think Aziz and I have done a good job to pat ourselves on the back of letting go of that bias, because we were in the same boat as all these book readers, but just let it go.
Especially young Alicent. We were all sorts of understanding with her. It's harder to defend her now, but we still think she's an interesting character, fascinating character. We name her the actress Olivia Cook as the best of this episode, and it might not be the last time. Probably won't be. So
I can imagine I should say I've been maybe some combination of careful and lucky to not be plot point spoiled by Twitter or whatever, but I have definitely been sentiment spoiled. People are just so ready to hate both Alicent and Kriston. Yeah. And I haven't seen either of them do something. They're not the most appropriate and heroic, but they're not as villainous as 5 other people on the show. So
you start to see it though here. Less with Kriston, with Alicent.
And I sort of assume just the way things go, it's not going to be as simple as it seems at first.
Agree,
but you're right.
But for example, talking about Game of Thrones,
you're right, though.
Even the sentiment does let you know something's going to change or go south, whatever. But even I can imagine, having read all the original books, my perspective is a lot different, right? But I think the very first episode when Tyrion smacks Joffrey around, I'm like, he's just a kid. He might be a punk, but he's just a kid. But then by the end of it, okay, that kid, Tyrion should have locked him up. He didn't go far enough. But in that moment, in these first couple episodes, Kristan literally did nothing wrong.
You're trying to come into a fresh episode, or come with a fresh perspective.
And people are just immediately calling him the worst, and he deserves everything he gets. And
I agree. That was very
okay.
spoilery.
I guess he's gonna do. Yeah.
It's too bad. Yeah.
I will say I even started to wonder. Did I say this out loud already? I started to wonder, like, what is he gonna do that's so awful? Is he gonna?
I guess you'll see.
Alicent gonna make him kill Rhaenyra's kids? Would he do that? Like, I was wondering if it would. But the kids seem to have grown up a bit and have their own agency, so I don't see that happening now. But I just imagine, like, I don't know, a Janos Slint moment where Kristan goes and slaughters babies, and like the way people talk about him, like, I don't know,
like, he killed babies. I get it. Yeah. Well, we'll see if he kills any babies. So far, he hasn't killed a baby. So. Yeah, the thought I didn't finish before about Otto and understanding Viserys and how he's like, oh, don't worry about it. Viserys will just forgive you. And she's like, okay, I guess so. And he just super forgives her. He's like, let's not talk about it again. She's like, I'm sorry, don't talk about it. He's like, oh, wow, that was really easy. Which is another thing, like, well, what else can I get away with more then? It's the same thing we thought about with Cole. Like, Cole got away with beating Joffrey to death and other things. And now, I mean, he's like, well, maybe I can get away with more. And it's like both sides kind of repeatedly aren't fully punished for their transgressions, which kind of gives them more leeway to do more.
To be fair, we haven't seen the end of it. Like, in that moment, he didn't go off on her. He didn't banish her.
That's true.
But she might not be welcome at the next council meeting either.
Yeah, there may still be some fallout. You're right. There may still be some fallout. Yeah. We'll see. So Otto is pleased as well. Another thing he expresses, like, look, this isn't as bad as you're saying. Like, yeah, you hurt your reputation. But kind of in Otto's mind, that was going to happen anyway. I think in Otto's mind, it's like, you were going to have to do some stuff anyway. You were going to have to, basically, this is very Cersei vibes, what he's implying she's going to have to do. Like, this is the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. That's why we cited this line, you play an ugly game, you have the determination to win. That was one of the first lines they released because it's Game of Thrones. It's the Cersei line writ differently. But same sentiment. And so Otto's just like, yeah, this was always going to happen. Like, he's like, don't worry about it. You were already going to get this reputation. And he's like, what? I was?
It reminds me earlier you were speculating on, what if it had been worse than Aemon losing an eye, right? What if he had been actually killed? What if it had been not quite as bad? What if it had just been a black eye?
Yeah.
Then maybe Alicent wouldn't have been justified in this moment, right? It might not have got to this point that Otto is kind of happy about.
I think that if it had just been a black eye, they would have played up. Rhaenyra would have had the opportunity to play up he took Vhagar, he hit the girls. Yeah. Like, I think that they would have had some moral high ground if Luke hadn't made Aemond permanently disfigured.
That allowed. I think that helped allow Viserys to just shove it all to the side because he's like, okay, both of y'all screwed up pretty big here. Yeah. So I can just say you both screwed up, so shut up. But if one side like clearly was in the right, it would be a lot harder to do. That's a great point. Yeah. So, but in his reference, he makes a very sneaky point, and not only did Otto call Aemond that rogue, which is Rogue Prince, which we pointed out earlier, but he also says that the price Aemond paid, we would pay is like worth 1,000 times what he gave. So, and he's talking about an eye. So 1,000 eyes in one. Booyah. Yeah, very good. Ashay immediately blurted that out when we were watching. He's like, 1,000 eyes in one. I was like, oh. Nice
and I was
catch.
so happy. So I tweeted that, and then I went and I saw Chloe of Girls Gone Canon tweeted the same thing at the same
moment.
time. Yeah, at the same moment. We were same brain
tweets at
moment.
the same timestamp, basically. Yeah,
I was like, hilarious. Hey.
So that was cool. 1,000 eyes in one, and you got to think he's probably right. Like an eye for that dragon, yeah. If it's going to come down to war, you definitely would make that trade. I mean, that's the biggest dragon.
I'm on the record as I will not give up an eye for a dragon.
Otto would give up your eye for a dragon, though.
I'm not sure if I would give up an eye for a dragon, but if I was in charge of an army and I got to choose 1,000 soldiers or 1,000 one-eyed soldiers and a dragon, I would take the 1,000 one-eyed soldiers and a dragon. I wouldn't bat an eye.
You wouldn't bat an eye. You would cut 1,000 of them. Yes, you would bat. I don't know. Whatever. Anyway,
bat 1,000 eyes. See, batting 1,000, you get a whole new meaning.
It's batting 1,000 eyes. Yeah, and bats don't bats can't see like those millipedes. Anyway, we're getting too deep in the metaphor here. So Kristen Cole, let's talk a little more about like a few other random things, like Larys's offer along these lines. He says, "An eye for an eye. Like you interested? I can get that going for you." He's like, "I'll take an eye for you. You know, that was an injustice." What a creepy smile this guy has. He is a great actor.
Yeah.
So she's like, and she is more. You can tell she's more and more taking charge. The way she speaks to him is more imperious than she's ever spoken. I think she's like, "That will not be necessary." But your devotion has not gone unnoticed. There may be a time when I need it for. It's like, this is what I mean, Sean, when she's like, okay. Now she's just saying, okay, I'm going to need that kind of underhanded killer. Basically like Rhaenyra was saying about Laenor. Like, Laenor's like, I'm going to be the man you want. And Rhaenyra's like, nah, you're not. Because the man I need is a killer, is a murderer, is an underhanded, and you're not that. You're too nice. You're too decent. You're too honorable. In fact, that's the problem. I need someone really dirty and underhanded, like Alicent has Larys, Rhaenyra now has Daemon.
Yeah, and Alicent just faced the fact that her protector, Kristen, was not willing to be her aggressor, was not willing to do that. And so she's like, oh, maybe I do need my two dogs, my
sneaky dog and my bulldog,
or two hounds.
Yeah.
I thought, or what it, her two Cleganes. I guess only one.
Yeah, two Cleganes. One was a mountain.
Was I going to say? I wanted to give Alicent benefit of doubt for a second there, because at first, again, I feel like in the past and maybe still, Larys is presenting sort of a tacit threat, like. There's a carrot and a stick.
A lot less tacit.
Hey, I can help you out. And if she's like, no, I don't want your help. He's like, okay, well, I'm going to work against you. Like, she doesn't want that, right? She knows how dangerous of an enemy he could be. So even if she's pretending and leading him on, she's like, oh, yeah, maybe I will need your help. Thank you so much. It hasn't gone unnoticed. God, please don't kill me and my family. You know?
Yeah.
But and even if I want to give her benefit of the doubt, also, as Shea just pointed out, she did just go through this moment where situations might get more serious than she had anticipated in the past, and even Kristen won't necessarily do what she wants. Now, she felt embarrassed what she wanted in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's a good thing she didn't have Larys right there to do it. I don't know. We'll see. I still can't quite decide how much Alicent is giving in to the dark side and allowing Larys to be her tool versus trying to keep her on.
Just keep him at arm's length.
Because she doesn't want him as an enemy.
Like leashed, I guess, using the dog metaphor a little farther. Yeah, like keep him leashed. Don't unleash him.
I feel like if Alicent was afraid of Larys to the point that and not thinking about using him, because I do think she is afraid of him. Like I think there is that element, but I think if she was afraid and also had no plan of ever using his skills, she would have just told her father, and we would have seen a scene with that. But I think the fact that she hasn't is because she wants to keep this in her back pocket as an option. Yeah. She hasn't approved of she didn't approve of the murder, but she might want him to take an eye still. You know, like
I had speculated before this episode.
After she talked to Otto.
It was after. He was on the ship that she talked to Larys.
It was after.
It was in their chambers that he spoke with her father. I had speculated before the episode that we play an ugly game. You have the termination window was her talking to Otto about what Larys had done. I mean, like, well, that's fine. You know, well, we need to do stuff like that. But nope, that's not the case. So as far as we know, Otto still doesn't know what Larys can do, what he's capable of. Maybe that'll change.
Well, Otto's like, why is this guy following my daughter around? Why is he here on Driftmark? What's his role here? He's not actually Master of Whisperers.
Which I think...
And Kristen Cole keys into that when he's like, why is Larys Strong staring at you?
Larys is overplaying himself.
Well, I think that's a good point as well. And I think that's something Alicent is realizing, that Larys likes her, that Larysent is something he wants to happen. And so that's maybe part of where she's realizing, I have more power over this guy than I thought before. Like, if he's got a big crush on me, rejecting him could be even more dangerous, but as long as I play it right, he'll be super devoted.
Do you think there's an element of Larys trying to be overt with his affection, him liking Alicent and not being surreptitious because he thinks he wants people to key into their connection? I think
it's a little Littlefinger-ish and Qyburn-ish. Like, he wants to make himself useful like Qyburn, where he worms into her good graces, but Qyburn wasn't like trying to hook up with Cersei, whereas Littlefinger is like, I want this redheaded highborn woman. And even especially right down to Littlefinger being Lord of Harrenhal. You know,
I think that Alicent is aware of that on some level too, whether she's I don't know, playing into it or trying to hold it back. But anyway, it occurred to me that she included discretion when she was talking to him. I need someone who's willing to do that and is discreet.
Yes.
I think that might have been a little bit of warning to him. Like, you need to back off a little bit. It's also possible, we were talking earlier about the timing of the funerals. Like, another reason I know they can't be happening at the same time, because there had to be enough time for Otto to show up. Like unless he's got Littlefinger's teleporter, right? Otto has to get there and leave with them to the funeral. So enough time has to pass. But he might have got there very soon before the funeral, too soon for him to observe the sort of goings on around the Red Keep. And he might not have seen what's going on with Larys, whereas Kriston has. He's been there all along.
Because Kristen's her shadow, her white shadow. He's her sworn sword. He sees all that. Like, anytime they're in the room together chatting, he's outside the door, probably aware of it.
Yeah, Kristen has to know a lot and think that Larys' demeanor has changed since before. Like that, like it's notable to him that he hasn't always been looking at her like
Alicent's schedule, their dinners.
And I think Cole is meant to be right. Like, he notices Alicent downplays it because she doesn't want him to. She wants to keep that discreet. Maybe she doesn't want her own. Maybe she recognizes they both like her and doesn't want them to have an issue about it. She's like, just play it chill, both of y'all. Just trying to HUD that off before it happens.
And Kristen might have also been warning her a little bit too. Like, maybe he's jealous, but maybe he knows, like, if I'm noticing this, I'm probably not the only one. Just be careful about this guy.
That is true. That is true. Yeah. So
Kristen was keen enough to give the right answer when he was called on to cut the boy's eye out. Like, he's not just an oaf, thug warrior. He's got some intellect, some observation skills, etc.
I really will give him props, because in that moment I did not know what I would have said if I was asked by Alicent to do that. Like, what I think I would have just not said a thing and not moved. But he had a perfect answer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, really good. So interesting bit of irony related to this is, at one point Rhaenyra says, "I don't think Alicent's capable of just cold murder," which maybe she would change her mind after the dagger scene, but we know for sure she's probably capable if she's saying those things to Larys. Like, I may need this kind of service, which cold-blooded murder is right up in there. Like, Larys has done that. And, but she also says, this is a nice segue to them, Rhaenyra says, "I think you're capable of it," to Daemon. And she's like, you're capable of all this kind of stuff, as if to remind him, like, Laenor isn't.
She's like, you have a murder cowl. It's well worn.
You've done several murders, and have rumored to do others. Was that you with Rhea? Did you kill Rhea Royce?
I do think it's so funny that the show and the characters were like, no, we can't kill these characters because they're gay, but this guy's fine. He's disposable. He's straight. let's kill this random worker kid. Like,
he might have been gay too.
Yeah, he might have been.
I do want to point out, like, that Daemon, like, even if they're like making him be better somehow, I don't know, pitching him as more a protagonist, but don't forget, we start the series off with him being judge, jury, and executioner of people on the streets. Maybe he magically, perfectly only captured criminals and gave them appropriate punishments.
Doesn't seem likely.
I don't think so.
Doesn't seem likely.
I don't think so. And even if they're trying to protect Laenor, they killed some random dude and maybe there's some backstory. We know that guy was really stealing from Corlys, but it seems that we're seeing that Daemon does not have scruples, respect for life, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I do not think he's a protagonist. I don't want to root for him.
I tend to agree.
I want to highlight that for people who are like, giving Rhaenyra and Daemon props for this plan. They killed someone for this.
Yeah.
Someone else had to die for
Laenor
this.
go, yeah.
Yeah, like, they let Laenor go, great. But I don't think it's actually some laudable, honorable thing that they did. Laenor just abandoned his family.
It's problematic.
Made his family think he was dead. Like, I don't think this is just an open and shut, this is a good, happy ending.
And they didn't do this to, like, stop war. They did it so they could get married, right? Like
they're preparing for war.
Yes, died.
Yeah. Well, a little time has passed till the wedding. We can assume.
Yeah,
a little time has passed. Not much. Like, probably a week or something.
He waited a whole month after his wife died before he married his niece.
You're supposed to wait 6 months to a year is the standard Westerosi mourning period. So like, it wasn't 6 months. Let's be clear. Yeah. So there's a lot of bad people with dragons. Right? I mean, we got a drunken lecher kid. We got a violent, one-eyed kid. We got Daemon, we got a whole list of grievances or ethical conundrums or negative
we
things
have
he's done.
8-year-olds.
We have 8
even
and
if they are
6-year-olds.
completely
Yeah.
good guys, they still might mess something up
Yep.
or turn into bad guys over time.
You're right. So it just doesn't bode well, does it? Yeah. There's a really interesting shot that we saw a lot in the trailers of Rhaenyra just gazing out over the open sea. It was a trick. Because when that scene actually happened, it had all these things. It had 3 dragons and a ship. So in the trailer, just early trailers, she's just looking out over the water and there's nothing. So clever job there, House of the Dragon. That was a really cool moment. The dragons flying away with Vhagar leaping off the cliff like that. Just epic. Really sets the stage for we're leaving now, but you haven't seen The Last of Us. TKOK podcast says definitely had spoilers for Game of Thrones. Only typically it would be in the comments of an article about an episode. Okay, so if you're reading comments in some online article about an early episode, people would comment, "Oh, this is going to happen," or "They're setting up this event."
Now since then we've had the demise of the comment section in articles, in that a lot of those websites turned the comment sections just off entirely.
Yeah,
which was a net loss, I think. Ultimately, I think that's I miss the comment sections for articles. I do, but it was a hard thing for all these different websites to maintain their comment section and keep them from being terrible.
Yeah, moderating takes work. Like it is a job.
I was gonna say, there's probably a few people out there that are quite thankful.
Yeah, they're quite thankful to not have to do that job. But the people, the conversations are still just happening on Twitter, which is also not moderating it to that extent. So like moderation needs to the moderation needs to happen at some point if a conversation is happening.
All right, one major remaining topic and then one minor topic. The marriage of Daemon and Rhaenyra and topics related to their pairing. Rhaenyra says fire is such curious power. Another thing that was so great about that, her holding back the dagger from Alicent, was when they showed the flame behind it to kind of emphasize that this is the ice and fire dagger with the flame in front of it, like this unspoken aspect that's going on behind the scenes. The Valyrian ceremony was pretty cool, but uncomfortable because they cut their lip with obsidian. I'm like, and then they cut their hand, which I'm squeamish about hand cuts, and I don't love lip cuts either, to be honest.
They used obsidian, and then David J. Peterson said that they used the bloody marks on their foreheads were the Valyrian glyphs meant to symbolize the Valyrian glyphs for fire and blood.
Yeah,
as you see right there.
But really, this is fire mated to fire. There's blood in the ceremony, but their personalities are both fire. Emma D'Arcy, again, that's the actress who plays Rhaenyra. They say this is a terrible idea. this marriage. They call it dangerous chemistry, which is a really good way to put it. Fire, it's classic bringing out the worst in each other. Fire feeds fire. You need like a balancing. You need some fire and ice to ground one to the other, but this is
almost like fire and gasoline.
Yeah, totally. Laena called it, their outfits are apparently really traditional. Shea, what did you say, that they're designed sort of like fancier versions of the Dragon Keepers?
Yeah. They said they used the model of the Dragon Keepers tunic-y outfits as inspiration. But there's also this like Asian type of inspiration too, with like the kimonos
they said they wanted
they're
it
wearing.
They said they wanted it to seem older than the Targaryens. They wanted it to seem like ancient.
Yeah, thousands of years old is what they
Thousands of
referred
years
to as some of it as. And we have it's funny because I noticed people pointed out that we don't actually see Rhaenyra from the front and all of that, but in the behind the scenes, we see her headpiece from the front, and so you can see. But we also, in the behind the scenes, we see this great concept art of them in their clothing. With this headdress she's wearing. And notable in the preview, we'll get into it on Saturday, but in the preview for next week, Rhaenyra is also wearing one of these robe type pieces of clothing, just like casually on Dragonstone, like a red tunic outfit.
She's just showing she's embracing the Valyrian heritage even more. They're going full Valyrian, as the Greens very much represent the Faith of the Seven ideology. So I think maybe that's a choice by the showrunners here to show the difference in their religious orientation, cultural orientation, the cultural background. One of them is emphasizing more Andal, Westerosi, Faith of the Seven values, whereas this faction is emphasizing fire and blood and Valyrian heritage. Pretty cool. I like that. There's also an element of maybe some nod to the books here, and not Fire and Blood. I mean, A Song of Ice and Fire. the Red Priests, the robes, some of the robes, especially the ones that Tyrion and Jorah see outside the Temple of R'hllor in Volantis, they are wearing robes that are described a little bit like this, if not a lot like this, where it's like cascading shades of orange, varying shades of orange and red, which is what we have here. It's like kind of fading, like it gets more and more orange until it gets red. And when I saw that, I was immediately what I thought. I was like, oh, looks like sounds like the description of the Red Priests' outfits in Volantis.
You know what?
Which presumably are outside Volantis too.
I really appreciated the like meaning, I guess, the greater meaning when you look at the two of them dressed like that, which is just that they're on equal ground with each other.
Identical garb. You're right.
Identical garb.
Almost
like
identical,
it's not the I don't
yeah.
know. It really emphasized that they're coming to this marriage as equals.
Yeah, there is a little more.
It really
equality.
emphasizes that they're family members.
That's a great point, Ashaya, because you're right. Like the bride and groom, like in our culture, Western culture, they're very distinct looking. Usually have like the tuxedo and the white dress. Whereas these are, you're right. This is almost identical, other than the headdress and like earrings or whatever. It's literally identical.
Yeah.
So
same clothes.
That's a great observation. Did I already point out Maester Girardi standing there with those kids?
No, you did not point out Maester Girardi.
So you showed the children standing there watching this ceremony, probably very confused and like, what the hell? You know, like why? Like this is all a little too fast. But Maester Girardi is like, yeah, you know, come on, kid, it's cool. He looks like he's a pretty, I mean, from this shot, he looks decent, you know, like a decent Maester. I don't know. And that does, slight spoiler, play out. Like Maester Girardi seems like a good Maester. And we were wondering if he'd be cast, but it seems like he was.
Mm-hmm.
Is Maester Girardi Corlys's?
No,
the Dragonstone Maester?
Yes.
The Dragonstone Maester.
There was a different
Rhaenyra's.
Maester on Driftmark. That's how we know this is almost certainly on Dragonstone.
On Driftmark, was that the one that was sewing them up?
Yes.
Was he,
that was a different guy. That guy had a beard. He was older, so clearly a different man than this guy.
It wasn't like a switch of Orwyle?
No.
Orwell's the King's Landing Maester.
Yeah, Orwell.
Right,
yeah.
I'm just clarifying.
Maester,
He's probably still the Maester. We'll see him when we go back to King's Landing.
Yeah.
We're in different locations. That's why we're seeing different Maesters.
Yes.
Exactly.
So we really wonder, like, how will Corlys and Rhaenys react to the whole Laenor thing? Whether or not they will be in on it, or whether they'll be mad, or suspect that Rhaenyra and Daemon did it separately, but also depending on which version of events is used for the story, how are they going to react to this marriage? As well as how is Viserys going to react? How is Alicent going to react? How is Otto going to react? A lot of reactions are going to matter. It may be a action item on the small council. On the other hand, the reaction is going to be delayed because there is a 6-year time jump after this episode.
Is there?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think I did see there's different actors. Yeah.
But we're in it with the new
quick,
actors after that. We'll stay
that's
with
the
them.
last major time jump. There might be like a month or 2 time jumps, which doesn't even really count as a time jump in this.
Yeah, but there won't be actor change time jumps.
Yeah, the final change of actors.
The I just wanted to point out the idea that, you know, Rhaenyra and Daemon now getting married. I'm just imagining like Luke being like, wait, who's my father?
Yeah, wait, which one's actually my father?
Well, it's like Charlie with the chart in Philadelphia.
Yeah, that's really good.
You're Targaryen, that's all that matters. That'll be the answer every time. Yeah.
Great comment from Eldrick Stoneskin here. I guess this is a super chat from Australia, I believe, what A means. Interesting that in Valyrian weddings they dress in red and white, have bloody lips, reminding us of werewoods and Wedding the Tree. That is a fantastic catch. Yeah. You're very much right. The coloring is very similar. I like it. And that may be something we can talk about later. There'll be an additional uptick in werewood stuff and northern stuff in season 2, so we'll have to put that on the shelf for now. But in the meantime, keep looking for parallels and opportunities to set that all up via discussion without spoilers. And on Saturday, we will have spoilers.
Yeah, I will say, people in the chat who have brought up things to do with Jace and Bela and marriages and all that, tune in on Saturday.
Yeah, these are a lot of unmarried kids right now. That's obviously, that's always something that happens in the Game of Thrones when you have princes and princesses and alliances need to be shored up. the discussion of marriage is inevitably raised. So yeah, we'll talk about that later. Let's talk about the dragons for now. As we said earlier, more dragons than we've ever seen at once in any Game of Thrones program. Of course, there were only 3 total in all of the first Game of Thrones, so you couldn't have been more than 3 at any given time. We had how many on screen at once? Was it 7 or 6? Meleys, Caraxes, Vhagar. Well, Vhagar wasn't on screen with the others at that time. Meleys, Caraxes, Dreamfire, Sunfire, Syrax, and Seasmoke. I think all in this shot. 6 dragons. I think I can only see 5 right there.
Yeah.
But I think...
Yeah, I remember counting 5 in a clip somewhere. I wouldn't be surprised if there were 6 and I didn't catch it. But...
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on this one shot is all the dragons we see. And then we also, of course, see Vhagar later.
I think maybe Meleys isn't in that scene. Or maybe Caraxes isn't in that scene. I'm not sure. But you can definitely see Sunfire and Syrax. And I think that's Seasmoke. There's silvery gray right there. That looks like Seasmoke, the one on the right. And then... upper left might be Dreamfire. That's hard to tell. That one's just so hard to tell what's going on. That one's too far away.
I'm looking for Caraxes' tail. Long tail, but no, I don't see it.
Moon Dancer, we were kind of hoping to see. That's Bela's dragon, but no luck this time. Some other time, I presume. Shay asked that good question about how's it going to work with Laenor and Seasmoke now? Is he ran away? Will the dragon bond fade? Will he die off screen so the dragon can be ridden by someone else? Will the dragon just stay unriderless forever? We have questions.
If you go to his niece, everyone will be happy.
And so to be clear, once something happens in the books, they don't have to go that way in the show. They could easily just have a different dragon, replace Seasmoke in the show. I don't think that would cause any great plot holes. I think that would be preferable to me to the idea of 2 living dragon riders. But even though we've never seen 2 living dragon riders, that doesn't mean that it is impossible. Especially if it's also that's my least favorite of the solutions here, but there's multiple solutions, and we will get into them on Saturday when we can actually talk about the ramifications and what that could mean. But I think it's very possible that eventually Laenor just dies too by the time he needs to be dead. Like, that could happen. I don't know.
Well, where there's sea smoke, there's sea fire. So maybe they'll just add a new dragon called Sea Fire, and that'll so I think that's about it. One other point I wanted to make, it's kind of fun to think about you brought up Vhagar landing on the gathering spot because doesn't have full control over her, and that dragon is really huge. Well, where are they going to store Vhagar at King's Landing? They definitely already made a point that Vhagar's too big for the dragon pit. So I wonder, this will have to be addressed somehow, like Vhagar lives just outside of town or something like that. Maybe they find a spot.
Maybe Aemon has to go somewhere else with Vhagar.
Yeah, maybe. You're right. So we'll have to see about that. We'll be curious what they do. I'm sure there'll be a little explanation on that, perhaps. Yep.
Well, one other thing that I touched on earlier, the idea, that conversation that Corlys and Rhaenys were having about who was going to inherit Driftmark. When everything broke down with Alicent attacking Rhaenyra, it seemed like at the end of that, Corlys is lining up with Rhaenyra against Alicent, which makes me feel like he's less likely to want those kids to inherit Driftmark, which will make up for the rift between him and Alicent, or more of an alliance of, putting him in the blacks against the greens.
Yeah.
Just one of the little plot point, thinking forward how things are going to go, what I expect to happen from that. Because I was a little confused with what Rhaenys was wanting.
Yeah.
It seemed like she was lining up with Alicent, incidentally at least.
Yeah, not I want to be Alicent's ally, but just her wish would have been similar, like override, just like skip the bastards, basically, which is what Alicent wants. Alicent wants them exposed or whatever. Yeah, so we can't comment on that because it's pretty spoilery, but yeah, you're right to raise that topic and point to that conundrum, that difficulty, that decision that has to be addressed one way or the other. But I think that's about it. I think that's our episode. Unless either of y'all have any final comments, we'll start saying goodbye. Thanks to everyone who showed up. We appreciate the live support. I guess we had a new high for the year on live attendees. Yeah. Seems like just like the show keeps gaining viewers every week, which is highly unusual for a TV show. Usually there's a drop off. We're gaining viewers as well. It's a great sign for the health of the fandom. We love that so much. We're very grateful. It's a blessing to be able to do this for a living, to do this work, and to have this much fun with y'all. We couldn't have hoped for it to be this good, and we hope it stays this good. Thanks as well to Michael Klarfeld for the video intro and our wonderful maps that you see behind us. Thanks to Bran Winslow for...
If you can get a cat, Sean, that'd be cool, too.
Yeah. If you
have time?
I
Time.
think so.
Quick.
Yeah.
Bran Winslow, a.k.a. Bran the Builder, for our newer House of the Dragon video intro and music. Thanks to anyone who supports us on Patreon or through a Spotify subscription, which gets you bonus episodes, occasional shout-outs, access to scripts, things like that. Check it out at patreon.com /History of Westeros, or, like I said, just use your Spotify account and get the bonus episodes that way. We'll be back on Saturday with our spoiler-filled review. As always, that's 3 o'clock. Joanna Robinson is our guest this week. That's the Joanna Robinson.
Currently of the Ringerverse.
That's right, the Ringerverse. So we had Jason last week, formerly of The Ringer, now of X-Ray Vision podcast and the official House of the Dragon podcast. This week, we have Joanna Robinson, currently on The Ringer, and me and Ashaya, are guesting on X-Ray Vision. That's Jason's other podcast on Wednesday. It'll release on Friday, so we'll make sure to remind you all about that.
Yeah.
And Sean brought a cat, which rhymes with
Yay.
what I just said.
Nice.
Look
It's
at
been a
that
little
kitty.
while.
That's a cute
she's
little
looking
girl.
Look at
big.
little Cora.
Oh,
Yeah.
she's so sweet. You know, I liked the
Very
description
good.
Ryan Condal was comparing Vhagar. He called her a grumpy old cat who's getting woken up.
Oh, and did y'all notice that there was a moment where the subtitle said Vhagar purrs? It was an actual
Yeah.
purr. Like, yeah, so that was, I bet that was Condal's influence. They're like, oh, a cat, eh? Let's make her purr. Fire-breathing cat with a huge gullet that looks like more like a turtle than a grumpy old cat. Grumpy cat, yes.
Oh.
Check out our friends on Direwolf City. They're going live in just a few minutes after this, or if you are catching this later, then catch them later too.
I'll put a
And, of
link
course-
in the chat.
Yeah, and of course, catch our friends Radio Westeros on Tuesdays. I think that's at 7.
Yeah,
They
it's
go
7.
live. And you can catch their excellent analysis as well. And we will be back soon with more. I did release that Kristen Cole video over on Indie Geek's channel.
Oh, yeah.
Make sure to check that out as well. That's a good one, explaining why he was able to escape punishment in greater detail.
Oh, I thought you were saying explaining why he's a hero.
Why
I did
he's
not
the
write a
hottest
video on why he's a
person in the
hero.
realm. An actual quote from Sean Payne.
Sean,
Hottest person, not hottest man, hottest person.
and he also said Kristen Cole did nothing wrong.
Yeah. I don't know about that.
At one point, up to a certain point.
Yeah, up to the point we had first
Now-
seen him.
Now he has simply done less wrong than anyone else. He's done something wrong, but
I don't know
not as much
about
as
that
anyone else.
Even he hasn't cut someone's eye out. Luke did that.
Luke is the most problematic
No,
man.
Kristen
in
Cole
the
killed
realm.
someone. I mean, he beat someone to death.
6-year-old
I mean-
child.
It's like, nope, we didn't see, though. We never saw. Joffrey was already dead when Kristen Cole started punching him. It's like, yeah, I was just making sure. I was just checking. Yeah, he's dead. I verified it. It's all right, everybody. Go back to what you were doing. All right, everybody. Ending on a very strange joke. We'll see you all.
On a silly note about a terrible death.
Yes. Well, it's fictional. We can have fun with it. Yeah. Anyway, y'all, we'll see y'all next time. You know what to do. Valar reread us and Valar rewatch us.